welcome to the SKology Podcast. This is Cliff, and I am here with Gary Biggs. Hello, Gary.
Hey, Clifton, how are you?
Good, sir. Good. Thank you. Gary is definitely one of those stalwarts of the industry. For those who looked at cardio competition in particular through the 90s through the lens of magazines like I did, we all were accustomed to seeing Gary and his vehicles featured in the magazines and covered quite extensively. And I think through the later period of time of Gary competing, he definitely was known for having the loudest car in sound quality. Maybe not the system, but when it was started, everybody knew it was there. We'd like to get more of a background on, who Gary is and how he got here and everything else. So that's, why we invited him on like many of the other guests. So Gary, if you wouldn't mind, give some background on what got you into audio and cardio in the first place.
Sure. So first, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
It's been a long road. I graduated high school in 1987. And that summer, a good friend of mine, Pat Cunningham, he was really my very first introduction to car audio. He had a Monte Carlo. He had a kind of a small Rockford system in it. And I had always grew up loving music and liking music. And it was just like, man, I was just like flipped out. I was like, I've got to have a system in my car. So I had a 1979 Mustang. Pat was hanging out at a stereo shop called the Hi-Fi Shop. So naturally, I just kind of gravitated to the same shop that he hung out at. So, at the time, I really didn't know anything about it. I went there, checked that shop out. They had a stack over in the corner of the room. They always had a stack of stuff as it worked out of used equipment. So the first thing I did was I put basically put a system together and kind of sort of put it on layaway.
Okay.
And that consisted of a pair of Rockford Punch 15s, a Rockford Punch 150 amplifier, a Punch 45 amplifier, and a pair of Polk Audio MM1As, dual cone 4-inch.
Huh. Nice.
And a Pioneer detachable face CD player that had just came out. I was up with the times. I had a CD player. I had a pair of 4-inch speakers. And I had a pair of 15-inch woofers.
About what year was this?
This was the summer of 1987.
Okay.
Yep, the summer of 87. And so the salesperson was that helped me with that system was Bart Deal. And Bart eventually left that shop and went to work for PPI, maybe it was Rockford, and then PPI, and then he eventually found his way, and he's currently one of the national sales guys at Kicker. So every time I see Bart and we start reminiscing about stuff, I tease him about that awesome system he sold me at the very beginning that got me hooked on all of this.
That's great.
So yeah, lots of fun. So I put that system on layaway. It didn't take me very long. I scraped and scrounged, and back then through high school, I collected baseball cards and wandered into a baseball card shop that was there locally and started talking to the guy. And so I sold a handful of ball cards, and basically that's kind of sort of how I got my first system.
Okay.
And really just never looked back. And
right.
What was very interesting, so the shop, the Hi-Fi Shop, those guys did the installation because, at that time I'm fresh out of high school. I don't know. I didn't think I knew how to do any of that stuff. I had always taken wood shop and metal shop and stuff like that through high school. So I was always pretty good kind of with my hands and mechanically and that kind of stuff. But obviously, car audio, working on my car, I didn't think I was a mechanic, so I didn't think I was qualified.
Right.
So those guys did the first system, and it was interesting about, as you can imagine, with a pair of 15s and a pair of little 4-inch speakers in the bottom of my doors, it didn't take long to blow up those door speakers. So about a week after my install was done, maybe not even a week, maybe 3 or 4 days, the left door speaker quit working. So I went back to the shop, and I walked in and talked to Bob Zwan, the owner of the store. He's like, yeah, no problem. We'll take care of it for you. He handed me a screwdriver, and he said, go out there and take that out, and I'll give you another one, and you can go out there and put it in.
You're like, whoa, wait, what?
I promise you, he took a double take because my eyes were as big as flying saucers. I mean, I was like, what? So I did. I walked out there. I took 4 screws out, took that speaker out, unplugged it. I immediately thought, holy cow, I can do this. This is awesome.
I'm an installer now.
Exactly. So I took the speaker back in. He handed me a brand new one out of a box. I went out there and I installed it. I connected it back up. It worked. I put the screws in. From that point on, that store lost a lot of money because I became an installer. I started doing all my own work. I was doing installs for buddies of mine, because at that point I knew I could build boxes. I had done that in woodshop already.
Right.
And now I'm a master electrician because I can replace a door speaker. So then it didn't take long, and I realized that one of the other salesmen there, his name was Mark Kraft, showed me some other speakers. He introduced me to tweeters, so now I knew what a tweeter was. So I bought a pair of tweeters and installed those in the top of the doors. I replaced those little 4-inch speakers with a pair of, I don't recall the model number, but they were made by Petra. It was a big 6 or 7-inch mid bass. I mean, it had as big of the motor structure, the magnet on that thing was as big as what was on those 15-inch woofers. They were huge. So I put those in the door. So now I've got a pretty good little system. I got right. Highs, I got mids.
You can hear all the music.
Subs. Yeah, and it was huge. It made a big difference. And so about that time, I'm hanging out at the store, and now a few months go by, and they host a stereo contest. And it was Thunder on Wheels. That's what it was called, Thunder on Wheels. George Reed was the Rockford rep at the time. George brought a whole slew of vehicles up. He had I think it was a 300Z that was loaded out with, I think it might have been Hafler stuff or something in it. I don't exactly remember. He had his dually Chevy truck that had all gold-plated Rockford subs and amps, 18-inch subs in it. He had another couple vehicles there. And, there was probably, I don't know, maybe 100 competitors. There was a lot of people there. I was in awe. I mean, I was overwhelmed. So anyway, I entered the contest, and let me back up. Mm-hmm. So that's when I figured out, there's power classes.
Okay.
So
right.
I bought another Punch 45 and I put it on my 15s, and I had a Punch 45 on the mids and highs. So I had 90 watts. So I was in the 0 to 100 watt class.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. 0 to 100 watts, Thunder on Wheels. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I'm a novice. You know what I mean? In fact, you know what? It might have even been a novice class. But there was about 15 or 16 competitors, and I was the only car that would be, as we call it today, a do-it-yourselfer. I was the only one that did it myself. All the other cars were built by, local shops and people that had traveled in and stuff like that. So that's why I was, I was so scared. I can't even tell you.
Right. And there was no internet. So there was no idea. You didn't have any preparation on what to get into. You didn't know any of these people. It was just you and your car, right?
I did. The only people I knew was just the guys, at the hi-fi shop that were working there.
Right.
I'd been around a couple of some of their other customers that were also competing, but for the most part, there was 99% of the people I did not know. I didn't even, I entered the contest, and the only thing I knew was power class. I didn't know there was a score sheet. I didn't know that, you should have maybe a few pictures to help document some of your install or any of that a few of the other guys.
You had to do it all back then, right? I mean, it wasn't like you were just, you weren't just doing sound or SPL or install. You were having to do it all and severely underprepared.
Oh yeah. But I remember it like it was yesterday. We did sound quality, and then we did SPL, and then we did RTA measurement. And, all I can remember was you can't make adjustments between the different things that you're doing. And so, man, I'm freaked out because I'm like, man, I'm afraid to even put my hand near the radio. I don't want to think I'm making, doing anything.
Right. You're a cheater.
Exactly. So I did all that, and came time for the trophy presentation and everything. The parking lot is full.
Right.
I can't even tell you. I don't even know how many people there was, but I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't believe it. And so they gave trophies for the top 5 spots.
Right.
So they called 5th place, not my name. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I didn't win nothing. I never even dreamed of being higher than that.
Right.
They called 4th place, not my name.
Oh man.
3rd place, not my name.
Now you're sweating.
And So yeah, so I'm like, it was weird. I wasn't mad, and I wasn't unhappy, and I had just written it off. You know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
there's you know what I mean. I read it off. I'm not getting a trophy.
Right.
They called second place, and then they called first place, and it was my name.
Oh my goodness!
I couldn't believe it, and so I only won by like 1.5 points. What actually helped me win was my SPL. I had those 215s on a Punch 45, and it did 131.6 dB. I remember it, like I said, like yesterday. And so
it's a good thing you got that second amp.
Well, exactly. At that time, that was serious SPL, because there was another guy, I don't remember his name. We actually kind of became friends later on, but he had a Camaro, and his installation was done by that shop. We had similar installs, except, his is all professionally done. And his SPL was like 128 dB or something like that. So that was a big deal that I killed everybody on SPL. So, I got beat on sound quality by a few points here or there. And I got beat on it seems like I got beat on RTA really bad, because I remember one of the judges saying, "Man, you ain't got no mid bass." And when he said mid bass, I'm thinking, no, I got bass.
Right. I got 215s, man.
I got 215s. What are you talking about? I don't have mid bass. I didn't know what mid bass was. Right. All I heard was bass.
Right. I think that's still the case today, and for a lot of people.
Right. So I won. Everything's cool.
Right.
I go back to the shop, the following Monday or Tuesday, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm really confused. The guy said I didn't have mid bass." Back then, I think it was, I don't remember it was an Ivy. The RTA that they used was called an Ivy, I believe is what it was. So they looked at the printout, and, and Bob's like, "Yeah, you don't have any mid bass." I go, "How?" I said, "Come out to my car." So we go out there, and we're listening, and it's Flashdance. So, that was what they used for SPL. So we put Flashdance in, and I mean, my car is just about to come apart. The bass is just crazy. And my mids in the door, I didn't have grills on them, because they were these big old mids, and they're moving in and out as much as my woofers were. And I was like, and Bob's like, "Huh." He goes, "Well, you can see here." So that was my first experience. He started explaining to me how the RTA works and the frequencies and stuff like that. He goes, "To be honest with you, it looks like for those things to be moving like they are, you're getting plenty of power to them. Maybe you got one out of phase."
Right. And
so come to find out, that's exactly what happened. I didn't know when I did my install what phase was.
Right.
I didn't know that, positive and negative, because what I did know is AC, alternating current, that it's, it worked regardless of which way you hook it up. It worked.
Right. So you couldn't get it wrong.
That's all. Right. That's all I knew. So luckily, just by pure luck, I had hooked my woofers up correctly, or I would have probably been running around town with my woofers out of phase.
Throwing all your power at not hearing a thing.
Right. We pulled one of the speakers out, we flipped the phase, and I remember, like, it was crazy how much better it sounded, the vocal, I mean, everything was better.
Right.
So it was a huge, huge deal. So here's what's funny about that. So we get that all taken care of, and Bob's like, what you really need is an EQ. I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, I see all these dots on this screen, those are all, equal to frequencies. And if you have an EQ in here, you can bump some of those frequencies up or bump some of them down, and you can help make the system sound good." I'm like, "Man, sign me up. I want one." So he sold me a Rockford OEQ1. I get that thing wired in. It was, a really simple deal.
Right.
And there's a contest next week across town at, kind of a rival shop called Audiotech. I go up there on like a Thursday or a Friday, and Bob's going to spend some time with me, and we go out in the parking lot, and we're tuning on my car. And because now that shop also did some home audio, and Bob was respected around town as kind of a pretty tweaky hi-fi guy. And so, he knew a little bit about it. So he comes out, and we're tuning on my car for about an hour. Now, keep in mind that OEQ1,
one octave.
I don't remember. I'd have to look. Yeah, and only about, 8 bands or something like that, 7 or 8 bands. So it doesn't take much to get this thing going, but we worked on it forever. Well, and I had it the way I had my amp rack built, it was I had it like flushed in. So come to find out, after about an hour messing with that thing, I had the defeat button on. So everything we were doing wasn't making no changes or nothing.
I've had those days.
Yeah, so we spent a long time doing a whole lot of nothing. So he had me take that apart. He goes, man, there's something not right. You don't have this thing hooked up right. You got the outs going in or the ends going out or something like that. So we took it apart, and sure enough, the defeat button was on. But I remember Bob going, holy cow, your wiring is just unbelievable. It's immaculate. How or why or what made you want to, do it like that? I said, well, I don't know. I guess that's all I don't know. That's what you do, right? You do it nice and tidy, right? So it was funny. He was really impressed about the wiring and just the things that I had done. So it made me feel really good. So we got it tuned up and everything, and we went across town, and I got second place at that contest. But some guy, I don't know, he was like from Dallas or Fort Worth or somewhere. I mean,
right.
He came up, and the guy should have won from what I remember.
Right.
But it was awesome. And so that was my first two contests in about a 2-week time frame. And so then that was right about the time when I was over at that second store that day hanging out. There was some like installation news magazines and stuff like
right.
that I was reading through. And that's when I started seeing stuff. And man, I went around looking at every single car. I mean, I was that pesky kid that everybody was like, man, get away. I'm that chihuahua pumping these guys on the leg, basically. You know what I mean? Get away.
Can I hear it now? Can I hear it now? Can I look it out? Why'd you do this? How'd you do that?
Exactly. So, I was a sponge, and I was soaking it up. So anyways, right about that time, there was a lot of things that influenced my car audio experiences and career during this little time, because about that time also, Bart, that was one of the salesmen and kind of / installers there at the store, the guy I told you that, he sold me my first stuff. And
right.
So he left, and he went to Rockford.
Okay.
And so that opened up a sales position there at the store. And so the next day or two, one of the next times that I was in there, Bob's like, hey, I want to talk to you. I'm thinking, oh man, what'd I do wrong? You know what I mean?
Right.
What'd I do wrong?
Right.
So he offered me a job, a sales position. And I was like, holy cow. Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I still remember the biggest thing that entered my mind was whenever I heard that Bart left and went to work for a factory, then it entered my mind that, man, this is cool. I want to do that. And the first step is working at a shop.
Right.
So I took the job, and I was a salesman. And I don't recall being very good. I was probably terrible. But, man, one thing I did do is I vacuumed and I dusted all the home audio stuff. And,
right.
I made sure that, that place went from clean to super clean. I was just a worker bee.
Right.
Because I thought, man, I didn't know, what are you supposed to do if you're hanging around not doing that,
right.
nothing.
Waiting for somebody to walk through the door.
Right. So it's funny that you say walk through the door. So this kid walks through the door one day. He rides up on his bike, and he leans his bike up. He flips his bike upside down. I don't know, maybe it was like a mongoose or something. Flips his bike upside down, parks it next to the front door, and he comes in. We're talking, we're whatever. He's like, yeah, I'm fixing to turn 18, and I'm getting a bunch of money, and I'm going to buy a new Mustang, and I want to come in here and have you guys do a big system.
Nice.
So I'm thinking, cool, this is my chance to sell something. It never entered my mind that
things are going to start happening to me now.
Right. It never even entered my mind that this dude rolled up on a bike. You know what I mean? It just, I don't know. I was just excited that somebody was in there talking to me, because most of the people that came in, I think, realized pretty quick that I didn't really know a whole lot. You know how it is. You go in and
right.
You're talking to somebody. You want to talk to somebody that kind of knows what's going on.
Right.
I think they figured out this young guy probably didn't really know a whole lot. But anyways, this kid gave me the time of day, so I gave him the time of day. So this is no lie. Comes in like every week for I don't know, maybe it was a month, maybe it was 2 months, or maybe it was only a couple times. But he came in, every day for a while. And then one day I was off, or maybe I was out getting lunch or something. And I came back, and they're like, Bob's like, hey, you ain't gonna believe this. Your guy came back, and he's ready to do that deal y'all talked about. Y'all the big system. I'm like, really? And I told him that you'd be back. And so he said he'd be back a little bit later. So no lie, Vince shows up. And he comes walking in the door, and he's got his keys in his hand, and he's holding his hand out, and he's jingling his keys. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is awesome. Well, so first of all, this is truly the first, if I had to try to remember my first sale, this is it. Like I said, I don't even think I sold anything until this.
Right.
I was just a glorified helper.
Right.
And so it was about, I think it was like maybe in November or December. It was cold outside.
Mm-hmm.
The system that we had worked up was 4 Rockford 18s.
Oh, wow.
4 Punch 150s, one on each 18, some Polk speakers for rear fill, and some like 2 6-inch speakers, 2 4-inch speakers, a pair of tweeters in the doors, and it was a Sony CD changer, Sony Indash, the little half-din cassette player.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, it was the motorized. It slid out one
Right.
of those. Some kind of little Sony. It was all Sony, a Sony EQ. I mean, this and then a new alternator from Rockford, power wire, everything. And I don't remember exactly, but this was about a $15,000 system.
Wow.
And so, at that time,
Right, that's a lot of money.
yeah, that's like somebody coming in and I don't know, maybe spending $30,000
Right.
now, or maybe
Right.
even more. Because truth be known, I probably gave, I kind of sort of gave the install away.
Right.
I mean, I remember Bob saying, well, how long did you bid this thing for? I said, 2 weeks. He goes, well, if we can get it done in 2 weeks, then we'll be good. We'll be making money. But
Right.
if it takes much longer than that, then we're kind of going backwards. So Bob was about to go on vacation to Colorado to see his folks and go skiing and stuff. One of the installers was an older gentleman. His name was Doug. I'll tell you a story about Doug in a minute. So Doug managed the front of the store, and I remember saying something to Bob, or alluding that the only way we get to do this job is, Vince, the kid's name was Vince. I said, man, he really likes my Mustang, and he's got a Mustang, and, he wants me to help on the install. And so Bob's like, I don't care. So me and another guy, Dave, that was an installer, I worked on it all day. And then in the evenings when Dave was done with his job, we'd work all night.
Oh, wow.
And Bob was gone for like a week, and we did that install in a week.
Nice.
It was unbelievable. I mean, if you can imagine, it was a kind of an octagon wall with the 418s
Okay.
behind the 2 seats. It was because it was hatchback Mustang. It really, I still have pictures of it. It was really a very cool install that time. Everything was covered in carpet. It was stupid loud. He went to a lot of contests. He always got first or second place. It was really, really pretty cool. But that was my very first real pro level type install, sell, or anything. So it was pretty amazing. It's funny. And Vince and I became good friends, and he followed me to a couple different shops whenever I left and went to different stores. And, we maintained pretty good friendship for a long time. Years later, he attended my wedding and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's awesome.
So it's really cool.
Yeah.
That, that car audio, just like it does now,
Yep.
it brings everybody together, and lots of best friends in the industry are guys that, are within the industry.
Right.
So it's cool. So I'll back up real fast
Yeah.
to that, what I was going to say about Doug, because I saw something on Facebook a day or two ago, and it was somebody had posted a question like, what kind of tools what kind of tools should an installer have versus their pay, or something like that.
Right.
And so keep in mind, I go to this shop. I'm a salesman. I work myself into a position in the install bay, but I had no tools. Doug had a big toolbox, and Doug had every tool there was. And Doug, by trade, was also a regular, mechanic. So
Okay.
he could work on anything. He could rebuild a motor or anything.
Right.
In fact, later on, he did rebuild the motor for me in my Mustang. But the deal Doug had was, hey, you can borrow any tool that I have, but when you borrow it, I want you to keep a notepad and you write it down, what you borrowed. And then next week when the Snap-on truck comes, you need to buy whatever tool it was that you needed.
Right.
And so that's what I did. Next thing you knew, I owed the Snap-on guy more money than I was making.
Right. You were paying $29.95 for the next 42 years.
Yeah. So that's funny. So Doug was a great guy. He definitely mentored me early on. again, he was an older guy, but we became pretty good friends. And but that was a cool deal, and that's exactly what I did. Every time if I used crimpers or this or that, I made a note, and next week when the Snap-on guy rolled up, I bought it, and I still to this day have some of those same tools. I don't use them because half of them, they're half wore out or broke or whatever.
Right.
It's kind of funny. I don't get rid. You can ask Eldridge or any of the people that know me or are around me. I don't get rid of much. I'm not going to say I'm a pack rat, but I like nostalgia, and I like neat stuff. And
sure.
I got kind of a ridiculous car audio man cave museum kind of a thing.
Oh wow.
So yeah, that's cool. So that's kind of how I got into a job and got into competition. So now I've got this job at this shop, which is like a dream job. I owe the Snap-on guy more money than I make. So my car audio competition got put on hold for quite some time. I didn't compete anymore for several years until I was kind of sort of able to afford to kind of sort of do it again.
Right.
But by that time, so I worked at the Hi-Fi shop for a couple years, and then we had a shop across town, Audio Tech. Steve, that was a kind of a sales manager there, started talking to me and said, "Man, we got another store down in Wichita Falls, Texas, which was about 45 minutes down the road." He goes, "We need an installer down there, and they really only work on high-end cars." And so high-end cars, I didn't really know what high-end car meant because where the shop that I was at, we were the shop that we worked on everything, you know what I mean? But I didn't know what a low end car, I didn't know, none of that registered.
Right.
So I went down and met the store manager down there. His name was Jeff. I met him and he's like, "Yeah, we've got here in a couple of weeks, as soon as we can get started, we got this Ferrari Testarossa that we're going to start an install on, doing the all Nakamichi system." And I was like, "Nakamichi? What is that?" I thought maybe he mispronounced whatever it was. You know what I mean? I never heard of Nakamichi before. And a Ferrari Testarossa, that was Miami Vice or something. You know what I mean? I didn't know. It was something else. So he showed me the store and their install bay and some pictures of all the different Porsches and different things they were working on. I thought, man, this is a great opportunity for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stepping stone. I must be doing something pretty good for these guys to be interested. So it was a tough day whenever I talked to Bob and told him that I thought I wanted to leave. But it was perfect timing. I had a couple other crazy things going on in life, so it just made sense. So I went to work at Audio Tech, and literally one of the first jobs that came in the door, Jeff and I did it. It was a red Ferrari. At that time, we did some what I thought was pretty wacky stuff that even to today, guys nowadays are really just now doing some of the stuff we did then. So this would have been about 1990.
Okay.
About 1990.
What state were you in?
So the store was in Texas, right at just barely south of the Red River. I'm still living in Lawton, Oklahoma, so I'm just north of the Red River. So I drove back and forth every day.
Gotcha.
I needed to save some money before I could move and all that kind of stuff. I'm a young guy, single, living on my own. I had a couple roommates, you know what I mean? We start working on this car. It was a pair of Nakamichi 8 on the little package shelf kind of behind the seat, a pair of Nakamichi 6-inch speakers in the kick panels, and the tweeters were up in the corners of the dash. And we ordered, it was a brand new car at the time, so it was easy to get parts actually. So we ordered 2 hides of the European leather, the Ferrari leather.
Oh, wow.
It took about a month for that stuff to get there. Like I said, I keep everything. I've got a chunk of that leather still. It's in my toolbox.
And it probably wasn't very stretchy, was it?
No, there was no, stretching wasn't even an option. But the box, the way the package tray was built and everything, it was not square in any fashion. There was nothing square. Today, everybody's doing stack fab, and so that's what we did then. It literally took about 2 sheets of MDF to build this box because I cut everything out in rings and stack fabbed it. And I didn't know what Bondo was, but I knew what wood filler was.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine on all the edges to make it fit right, I taped it off and we used, wood putty, wood filler,
right,
and filled all the little gaps. And so that's how we did it. This was about a month long install because we took our super time on it, worked on it between projects, and that car was featured in Installation News magazine. In, like I said, I think it was around 90 or 91 or something like that. So that was a huge deal to have a vehicle featured in a magazine, because back then there was only a couple magazines. I mean, there was Installation News, which eventually has now turned into Mobile Electronic Retailer magazine, I guess.
Right.
It's gone through a couple of name changes over all the years. Car Audio and Electronics magazine was like barely brand new to the scene.
Right.
There might have been a couple other things, I'm not sure, but that was a huge deal, and it was huge for our shop, huge for anything down there, because I mean, at least all the shop, because you know everybody, all the installers and stuff. Everybody knows everybody. So it kind of launched Jeff and I to stardom once that thing hit the magazine. In our area.
Right.
We thought we were big shit. I mean, but the install was ridiculously cool. I've got the magazine of it. One of these days, I'll always keep saying I'm going to dig that out and post some pictures, because what we did in 1990 would rival what a lot of guys are doing today.
Right.
But it was just simply because, we didn't know how to do it wrong. We only could think about how to do it right.
Yeah.
Once you get a taste of that, then everything you do, you want
one up it. Yeah.
Yeah. During that time, that's when I got the Regal.
Okay.
It was an '82 Regal. So let me back up one second. So I still had the Mustang, still always kind of working on a system in it, but hadn't competed in it for a while or anything. So I went to IASCA finals in Tulsa. It would have been the first one, so it would have been about 90 or 91. Again, I'm bad with dates.
No, that's you're fine.
Somewhere through there. So we came up here to Tulsa, and that Mustang that I had built for Vince, he came up and competed. He ended up getting, I think, third place in his class up there. So that was a huge deal. I had built a motorized amp rack and some different stuff at that time for his car, and it was really cool, and it was the Flex Stone and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I did did a bunch of vinyl work in the back of it, and that was really kind of at that time. That was one of the first vehicles that had that kind of everybody was kind of doing a flashy but stealthy kind of a thing. So this was stealthy, but then you started taking stuff apart and you saw the flash. So it was kind of cool at the time for what we were doing. But anyways, we that night we spent the night, and that night we had dinner. I think it was at Applebee's or maybe at Chili's or something like that. And behind us, and I didn't know it till we could overhear the guys talking, behind us was a table of judges, the IASCA judges. And they were talking about Holly Mungle's Grand National time.
Yep.
And I remember, I believe at that event, Holly had two cars there. He had the Grand National and a Ferrari. But they were talking about the Grand National. And I remember them talking about, they were laughing and giggling basically because they were able to take points off because some screws weren't lined up perfectly square with each other.
Right.
And, some of the zip ties weren't evenly spaced and a few things like that. So, man, if you can imagine, I am making mental notes like crazy.
Right.
So from that point on, everything I did from a basic install to what might be a competition install, I lined the screws up perfectly. I had different little wood blocks, little 1 inch long blocks and 2 inch long blocks that were in my toolbox. And these were measuring guides for whenever I would do zip ties. I mean, every install was a competition install as far as I was concerned.
Right.
So I started building a system. So at that time, there was the Speakerworks Grand National. There was Holly's Grand National. There was several Monte Carlos and other Buicks and stuff competing at that time. And those cars were always the top cars. Those cars won, you know what I mean? All the time. And so I thought, man,
that's the ticket.
Me a Grand National.
Right.
I got to get me a Grand National. Well, then I figured out that, you know what? A 19 or 20-year-old guy.
That's a lot of money.
Cannot afford a Grand National.
And insurance.
Right. I had a buddy of mine, Ed Martin. He had an '82 Buick Regal Limited, and it was white. he bought it as a secondary car because he had a Blazer that he and I had become buddies, and we were working on a big system in his Blazer. And so he bought this Regal as a secondary car to drive while his Blazer was all apart.
Right.
I ended up buying the Regal from him. And so then really just kind of never looked back. I did a big Orion system in it. I came to Tulsa to a stereo contest at Car Toys up here Rob Rice was putting on. And I had just bought a brand new Chevy truck. I borrowed a buddy of mine's trailer, put the Regal on the trailer, and we came up to Tulsa. The system had Orion woofers that I had the baskets gold plated. I had the Gold Series Orion amps that had my name engraved on them, and they were all gold plated. That was the amplifier.
Oh, wow.
I had an Eclipse, an all Eclipse DD, the fiber optic system, with the preamp, the EQ and everything. I had all that in there. And then I had Focal speakers up front. And this was pre-Focal.
Right. That was when when we looked in the magazines and saw the expensive yellow cone speakers that didn't make any sense.
Exactly. I mean, this was you bought Focal from like Speaker Builder magazine and stuff like that. Yeah. Basically people that were building high-end home audio, do-it-yourselfer speakers would buy the Focal stuff and build home kits. Yeah. Well, because of my previous experience, working up at the hi-fi shop, Bob did the same thing. He would buy speakers, the Eton, Focal, a bunch of that stuff. So I had been exposed to that in building passive crossovers and all that kind of stuff. When I get ready to build the Regal, I mean, that's really all I knew. So I bought Focal tweeters and 4-inch mids and a big 7-inch mid. So, and this was the very beginning of kick panels, and horns. You know what I mean, guys doing that. Yep. So I put those 7-inch mids down in the kick. The 4-inch mids, I put them kind of on each corner of the dash. I rebuilt the edges of the dash, and then the tweeters were just in the factory locations in the top corners of the dash. Just firing up at the windshield. But the car, at the time, I thought it was amazing. Different people that listened to it thought it was amazing. Blah blah blah. So we come to Tulsa. This was a big show. We're going to come up here, and we check into the hotel about 1:30, and I have a 6:00 call to wake up so I can go get everything cleaned up. I wake up at 6. I open the door, and my truck and the trailer and the car is gone.
Oh no!
Somebody Slim Jim'd the door on the truck and drove off. Oh. And what's weird about that is I remember laying down. And just within, before I even fell asleep, I heard a kind of a bang and somebody drive off real fast. I never thought twice about it. Right. All I'm thinking is I need to get sleep because I got to get up early.
Right. Wow. So
yeah, some chuck wagons had stole my rig during the night. So the next day, I'm in freak out mode, right?
Of course.
Well, the police had recovered the truck already because they had just abandoned it literally just a few miles away from the hotel we were staying. But the trailer and the car is gone. So anyways, as you can imagine, we head home. I kept in real good communication with the police department in Tulsa. And I actually even came up and did a deal they don't have it up here anymore, but they used to have a TV show called Crime Stoppers. And I came up and did an interview on that and showed pictures of the car. Believe it or not, that day, a lady called Crime Stoppers and said, I got some information about that show car that got stolen.
Oh, wow.
And what had happened is, come to find out, to make a long story kind of short, the guys that stole the car and everything, this little operation of guys were known for breaking into and stealing cars from hotels along the highway, Highway 240, Interstate 244, for people that were traveling through town. Because generally, people traveling through aren't going to come back to harass them.
Right.
They let their insurance pay off and life goes on. Well, I didn't have one penny of insurance on my car.
Oh no.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I did my truck.
Right.
But, keep in mind, it never even entered my mind to have insurance other than just basic driving insurance. I didn't have insurance on all the system. It never entered my mind. I mean, I was naive to that. It never entered my mind that I need to insure all that. So anyways, so the police had kind of maybe an idea who they need to go looking for. Well, come to find out, sure enough, it was those guys.
Hmm.
And what they had done is they stripped the car down. They took the front end off, the fenders off, the hood off. They took the doors off. They pulled windows out. They stripped every piece of interior, the engine. I mean, it was nothing but a actual body.
Oh, man.
And they put it on a trailer. I think probably the same trailer that I hauled it on. And they basically went and pushed it into the river. But it didn't go into the water. It just kind of hung on the side of the river, on the bank, the river bank.
Right.
So this lady had saw it going down the road, and she called the police, and she told them, and the police figured out, yep, they probably tried to go push it in the river. So they went over there, and sure enough, there's that car sitting on the side of the riverbank.
Oh, my goodness.
So, the
Stripped.
record service comes, stripped. The record service comes, they pick it up, they impound it. They call me and say, hey, man, we have your car. I'm like, what? They go, yeah, but there ain't much left of it. I said, what do you mean? And so, again, there wasn't internet or nothing, so it wasn't like they could send me a picture. So I said, all right. I said, I'm going to come get it. And they go, man, are you sure there's nothing left? I said, no, I'm going to come get it. So I borrowed a trailer. No, I rented a U-Haul trailer, came to Tulsa, and it was funny. There at the record service, they literally took a forklift and went under the side of it, lifted it up in the air, and lowered it down on the trailer. And I put I tied it down with a couple tie straps and hauled it back to Wichita Falls. And I just parked it on the side of my house. Well, everybody driving by, all my buddies, they thought that I must have wrecked it because we were big into midnight drags at that time.
Oh yeah.
We were our own version of street outlaws. and what's funny is I couldn't get nobody to race me.
Huh. And
the reason was I had nitrous on it at the time. And one of the other guys in town that was kind of one of the big hot rod fast guys, he went with me on a ride down to lunch one day, and which was McDonald's, which was only 1 block away from our shop. Well, naturally, I couldn't even. Once you experience nitrous like that, you can't even go to lunch without using it. So I had digital gauges in the car at the time, which they were uncalibrated. So I turned the nitrous on. I'm doing a burnout from stoplight to stoplight, wiggling down the road, and the speedometer said like 135. So
he's freaking out.
You know what I mean? You don't know how fast you're going.
Right.
So after he told everybody that thing did 135 from stoplight to stoplight, nobody would race me.
That's incredible.
So everybody just naturally thought I wrecked that car, and it looked like it because it was muddy and nasty, where they tried to push it in the river. So so I got that car back. So funny story. Then I started going to junkyard, buying parts, and basically put it back together. I mean, it was the big joke was it was a junkyard car, and I mean it truly was. I mean every part of that thing came from a junkyard as I put it back together.
Well, I had no idea.
During that time when, going back and forth up here to Tulsa, for a court date, because they caught those guys. I would stop by and visit Rob at Car Toys, and so Rob offered me a job. So I thought, man, that sounds like a great deal. You know what I mean? So we loaded up. I've got my wife and my oldest daughter was only about a year or 2 years old, about a year old at the time. So I moved to Tulsa. And so then when I got to Tulsa, I had the car repainted white, started working on it, putting it all back together. Well, what was really cool at the time is because I never heard of sponsorship or anything like that before in my life. But all the reps were like, man, it sucks you getting your car stolen. Anything you want, let me know, and I'll help you get product again.
That's neat.
So Warren Essen was the Orion rep. And since I had already had Orion stuff in my car, I was talking to him. And so he got me hooked up with the guys at Orion. And man, for years, anything I needed, I got.
Wow.
When they had new product come out, they sent it to me ahead of releases and everything. So it was just a really cool deal. So I started competing. So my very first real system in, competing real, as a, really doing, because before that, I didn't know what I was doing. So, I get the Car Toys up here in Tulsa. One of the first projects that I'm on is Kent and I, we were working on a van for Sony. It was a Sony demo van, so we did that. And then I built an Infinity demo car for one of the reps. And so we just, and then built a van that was for Pontiac, for SEMA. And just started doing a bunch of really big projects because Car Toys was a big shop, did lots of business, and we had a great crew of guys. The guys that were there were awesome installers. So, I mean, I got there and I complimented them. They complimented me. You know what I mean? Hitting on all 8 cylinders.
Right.
That would have been about 95, roughly.
Oh, wow.
Give or take a year or two. And so that's when everybody there had a system in their cars, and we all competed. And so we were Team Car Toys. So we competed, and everybody did pretty good. Everybody was a second or a third place car. You know what I mean?
Right.
Nobody was a real first place contender, really. But, you know, we're working at shops. We don't have time to, you know, work on our cars like a lot of guys might at the time. The first world champion that we would have built at that time, it was Rob's Honda. We got Rob's Honda where it was pretty legit. You know, it won everything that it went to. Like my car, I remember the first year that I competed at finals, I think it was Dallas. I got like, you know, back then, I got like 5th place. The next year, 4th place.
Right.
The next year, 3rd place. The next year, 2nd place.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, like in 99, I think it was, I won. And at that time, they were doing, if I remember right, it was SQ and SQ Plus. So there was sound quality and RTA and install. And then there was sound quality, RTA, install, and SPL.
Okay,
so they
right.
were already kind of breaking
separating
SPL out of it a little bit, you know, and starting to do first SPL. What was it? I don't remember, but, you know, it was kind of the first SPL base, you know, racing or whatever, base boxing or base racing. I don't remember what they called it. Anyway,
right.
So I won that year, and then I you know, I literally won. I think like maybe 7 years in a row, you know.
Wow.
Dallas, everywhere we went. You know, Perry.
Right.
Always did really well at Perry. The best I did there was 2nd place against Wilson one year. I think Wilson got me maybe just a couple points. I'm pretty sure he cheated. Pretty sure there was some cheating going on. Wilson's a great competitor. Always built great cars. But got 2nd to him at Perry. About that time, somewhere in about 2000, is when I decided that, you know what, I want to do something totally different. And that's when the car was white.
Right.
Stripped it down, did a frame-off restoration, painted the frame, painted the underbelly, repainted the car. You know, it was all an orange color, did a tan interior.
Right.
I mean, I showed up to Oklahoma City finals, and it was raining and storming on the road down there. I literally got that car playing like that day. That was to do all of that in one, you know, kind of summer season before, so, you know, I qualified and then got my points and then tore the car apart. And it was all hands on deck. I mean, all the guys helped me. I mean, again, a great group of guys at Car Toys that helped me. I had a couple buddies at the time from Texas that I, you know, talked them into coming up there and working with us. So we just had a great group of guys. Rob was supporting. He'd basically let me do anything I wanted to do or to dream of.
Right.
So, you know, and competitors. I mean, at that time, I think, and again, I'm bad with years, but at USAC finals that year, one of those years, cars from our store won every single amateur class and every pro class and one expert class. I literally, when it came to the first place trophies, I think the only trophy we didn't win was maybe the one that Eldridge won. So, I mean, you know, at that time, we're on top. Yeah. If you wanted to win, we were, you know what I mean? We were the shop that you thought about bringing your car.
Right.
So about that time, we, Team Car Toys, all of us became part of Team Kicker when Kicker Competition Group kicked off.
Right.
Greg formed that. So that's when I redid the car. And I didn't even have time to put exhaust. You mentioned earlier about the loudest car.
Right.
I didn't have time to have exhaust built. So I start that car, and I'm driving through the basement where everybody's at in Oklahoma City at the finals down there. And dude, there's not a NASCAR around that was as loud as I was. Open headers, roaring through that place. It was crazy. It was crazy. It was unbelievable.
Of course, everybody's like, he did it on purpose.
Yeah. So what's funny about that is, at that time, and it probably still is, like I said, I haven't competed in a while. I haven't even looked at a score sheet in a while. But, you would get points docked for engine noise.
Right. And that's why everybody thought you were cheating.
Yeah. And so, in my mind, engine noise is, in retrospect, we all know what engine noise is.
Right.
Alternative whine or something like that. Well, so the judges literally would dock me. I would lose 3 points every contest because the engine was so loud you could not hear the audio system.
Right.
So they're like, we can't even judge that portion. So you're getting docked points.
Oh man.
So I always joked with all my competitors. I was like, man, I'm giving you guys 3 points automatically.
I'm trying to help you, man.
Yeah. Everybody'd be like, man, give me a chance. I said, dude, I'm giving you 3 points. As it was, I always felt like through that time frame, I was like, man, if a judge can take a point off of my score sheet, he will. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it reminded me of what I remembered hearing about Holly's Grand National was, hey, the car is so nice that it isn't like you're looking for points to add. You're looking for points to take away.
Right.
So when it came to the install side of it, since that's, that was my fame and glory, what I liked to do or whatever, I would often have a lot of my car. I would, have it where you could take it apart to see the wiring and stuff like that because I was super proud of it. There was nothing that I was worried about hiding or needing to hide or afraid for somebody to find.
Right.
And my picture book would be, 4 inches thick because I took a picture of every single screw, every single zip tie. You know what I mean? There was going to be no way somebody's going to take off points for something that they can't see.
Right.
That's what I did. And we built a lot of cars that, we'd have, literally, I remember one time we had cars lined up. Frank Rougeau's car from Louisiana, another guy from Colorado, Jeff Maeda from Washington State. We had literally, I remember we had cars in the bay lined up from, all over the country waiting on us to work on.
Wow.
to build up. So it was a really cool time. Consumers/competitors that were willing to let me do anything I wanted to do.
Just do your thing and make it happen.
Right. It was an experiment. So you get to do what you want. So over the years you would hear, and even today you hear a lot of shop or installers. It's easy to talk bad or talk down or find things wrong with a competition install.
Right.
It's easier to find something wrong than it is to brag about or boast up or talk somebody up on some of the cool stuff. And I think that's just human nature. But I used to always say, you know what? It's not necessarily the installer's fault or the shop's fault that isn't right or that is wrong. At the end of the day, the competitor or consumer is paying for the work.
Right.
And there comes a point, and I did this forever, and this is part of what helped me build my resume, build my business name. My business card was, a lot of guys would come in and they'd pay for a steak dinner, but for some reason I would think that I needed to give them the steak dinner plus shrimp on the side,
right.
plus the lobster tail.
Right.
You want a couple drinks to go with it? No problem.
Right.
I gave them way more than they ever paid for.
Right.
And nowadays I feel a lot different about it. I joke sometimes. I was like, yeah, I could brag about how many cars that I built at one USAC or IASCA or went to SEMA show or at CES show or, whether it was a cool Orion system or a Kicker system or a Rockford system or a Focus system, you know what I mean?
Right.
I could brag about all that, but the one thing I never was able to really brag about was making my bank account bigger.
Right. That's all of us, isn't it?
Right. So, I can brag about, all the magazine articles. I've probably more than a dozen covers and probably 30 something cars that have been in all the magazines and stuff.
It's hard to pay your mortgage with those.
Well, guess what? You don't.
Right.
You don't. You can send a picture of that to my bank and say, hey, look what I did this month. Can I pay my Can I pay my house payment? with
Hold,
that?"
hold
And
those, hold those
the answer is no.
hundreds on the front of the magazine. They want those back after you're
Right.
done with the shoot.
Exactly. That's funny. I forgot about that. That was a fun picture shoot.
I think that's probably how most people immediately picture you that were, at least watching the scene at that time. Was that magazine cover article was just so memorable in so many ways.
So back then, it's different than it is now.
Right.
Back then, to be nominated for Installer of the Year or Retailer of the Year, stuff like that, those nominations and votes were all done by manufacturers and manufacturer sales reps and stuff like that.
Right. Well, it was
nowadays.
It wasn't just everybody voting.
Right. You didn't know until you got a letter in the mail that said, "Hey, you were nominated as a top 12 installer."
Right.
You know what I mean? I remember the very first time that I was nominated and asked to attend the yearly Mira type event. It blew me away. How'd this happen? Rob, the owner of the store, he goes, "I had no idea. I didn't nominate your ass."
Thanks.
So it's quite a bit different. And don't get me wrong, I'm by no means taking anything away from
yeah.
guys nowadays.
It was, yeah.
It's just a different.
It came out of nowhere. It was more like a Academy Award or something like that, where it was
right.
It was all done in secret.
Yeah. So right about that time, not just a few months after the article in I think it was Auto Sound and Security with me kind of doing the pimp the pimp pick.
Right. I didn't want to say it myself, but I'm glad you did.
Hey, what's funny is I had about $300,000 worth of jewelry on it.
Oh my!
The watches and the stuff. Because we had a jewelry store next door to our shop that we were good friends with, and so those guys loaned me all the rings and the necklaces.
That's awesome.
Rolex and everything. Yeah.
So that was real. Cool. That wasn't those weren't props. Yeah, that was real.
It was all real, down to the $1 bill.
Dollar bills, y'all.
Yeah. Solomon Daniels called me. He goes, "Hey, we want to do something. We're going to start something new with the magazine, and we're going to start highlighting installers and retailers around the country versus just putting an ad of a woofer or an amp on the cover.
Right.
We'd like to launch this with you." So the very first mobile electronics magazine that, because every month, now it highlights a dealer or an installer and stuff like that. And I think that's awesome. It should be that way.
Absolutely.
So we did a big photo shoot with a Dodge Viper that I had just done a big system in, and I dressed in a tux. And at the time I had the James Bond, a flip phone. I mean, this was like a $2,500 cell phone.
Oh, wow.
So it was totally the opposite. You know what I mean? Went from pimp to James Bond. And so that was...
But you get all the girls either way, right? So it's all good.
Exactly. I wish.
You have to give those back too after the shoot.
Yeah. I've been so lucky and blessed. Honestly, we could just almost call a magazine and say, "Hey, we got this car," and they'd be like, "Man, we'll send somebody out to shoot it." I mean, built lots of vehicles for different manufacturers. In fact, once we had a kicker distributor from Venezuela that attended IASA finals or something, and he wanted a big demo vehicle built. So we literally went out and got the van, and we put 33 12-inch woofers in it. I mean, it was just an over-the-top, ridiculous kind of a SPL/SQ kind of system.
Right.
And this thing was shipped to Venezuela.
Wow.
We were just on top of the world with all of that type of stuff. Factories sent us prototype products.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an interesting story. Competing with Rob's car over all the years and everything, and Kicker starts developing a square woofer.
Right.
And they, obviously wanted to keep it under tight wrap, top secret. So Greg called me. This is right before I went to work at Kicker. So this would have been about 99 or 2000, right before the square woofer came out.
Right.
And so Greg calls me. He goes, "Hey man, can you come over here? I want to show you some stuff, and we'll go eat dinner or whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So like on my day off, I went over there. He shows me this square woofer, and literally, I thought it was kind of like in the back of my mind. I thought, man, what kind of joke is this?
Right. Okay, very funny. Someone finally made a square speaker.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So he goes, we want to, we're going to come out with these. We're going to show them at, I don't remember, maybe it was CS or whatever. I don't recall. He goes, but I want these in Rob's car. And I'm like, well, that's going to be pretty fun. He goes, but we can't let nobody know about them. He goes, I don't even want the other guys at your shop to know about it. I'm like, well, again, that's going to be pretty hard to do.
Right.
So I got with Rob. I don't remember all the details, but basically at the end of the day, we went and bought another Honda.
Oh my.
Another Honda Accord. So we had his Honda, which was white.
Right.
And we went and bought another one. It was brown. It was kind of like a junkyard Honda. It didn't run or nothing. So I started building a new system in the brown junkyard Honda.
Wow.
And Rob's car was now gone to the paint shop. And this is when we did the crazy paint job that had the purple and blue and had scallops and stuff. It was kind of in the middle of the Fast and Furious
Gotcha.
thing.
Yeah.
So I started building the new install. And so I did it with all the amps fanned out in the trunk and with 4 of the woofers in the back seat area. And so when I was building the box for the square openings, the guys were like, what are you doing? I said, man, I'm going to build square plexiglass lids that go on this. And then the woofer's going to mount. And then I'm going to put a bunch of neon inside the box and have it, glow and stuff. So that's how I got away with that.
And then you get it and they're like, hey, what happened to all the cool neon?
Well, no, but crazier than that. So the woofer, Greg gave me one woofer. I brought it back to Tulsa. And it's what I used to mock everything up with.
Right.
Well, I built a box and put hinges and a lock on it. And it was in my office, and that's where I kept the woofer. So I only pulled that thing out like in the early mornings or in the nights when I was up there working. So nobody saw it.
Right.
Me and Rob were the only ones that knew about it. I don't even think Don, the store manager, or Jeff, or I don't think anybody knew except me and Rob until the very last. But then, if you can imagine, I'm building everything with this prototype woofer, and everything's cool, and super tight tolerances on everything. Well, then when it came to production, the production woofer was ever so slightly larger than what I had been building with.
Perfect.
Not much. It was maybe only about let's just say if the woofer I was using was outer diameter 13 by 13 square, the new one was 13 and a quarter by 13 and a quarter.
Wow.
So it really messed things up.
Right.
So it didn't fit. It did not fit the openings that I had built for the car and everything. The whole back seat's a big giant fiberglass thing. So I had to build this cap that went on it to allow the space for those things to fit. And so when I did that, that really opened up a whole nother level of installation type stuff, because then I started incorporating those additional pieces and caps and everything on all of our work. So instead of just being a big swoopy fiberglass panel or something, we started incorporating inserts and stuff like that. So it kind of blessed us in a way, but it was like, oh my God, how am I going to make this work?
Right.
So yeah, in the first version of those woofers, we couldn't get them to sound very good. And so I ended up building some motorized aperiodic chambers that were inside the box that vented them free air out to the outside of the car.
Oh man.
And that car had amazing bass, and it had really amazing technology at the time that we never told anybody about. So if you can imagine, I had these flaps that were inside the enclosure that had holes that were cut to the outside of the car that had a AP membrane that tuned those enclosures a little bit. And then I had another aluminum panel that went over that with an actuator that would seal them off.
Oh, wow.
So what was really cool, as we found out, is when we were doing SPL, we would close those flaps so it was a small sealed box to get maximum SPL.
Right.
Then for sound quality, we'd open those vents so they were basically free air to the outside of the car. And then for RTA, it would be somewhere in the middle of that. So they were kind of half damped or what have you. And that gave us great low-end response for RTA. And it kind of kept out some of the outside noise that you might would hear, from other cars, in your lanes.
Wow.
So, and, those are things we never showed that to anybody.
Right.
There was a lot of things that we just didn't show, because at that time, it was an advantage. It was kind of an arms race to see, the more you could keep secret, the you thought you had a competitive edge, and you kind of did. in a way.
Right. I think it's very different now. It might be because of the internet or different perspectives or whatever, but I think, everybody expects everybody to be very open about all these things now. If somebody's winning, it's one of those things where, what do you do? What are you doing different? And it becomes a learning experience.
Yeah.
But in a way, I think it's actually kind of damped the enthusiasm to go outside the box on these things, because at the end of the day, it's kind of, so what?
Yeah.
But it'd be great to see that kind of push on trying things that are outside the box, literally.
Well, yeah, and I think the big difference, and again, this is me kind of the outside looking in. I currently don't have a horse in the race, so
Right.
maybe my opinion ain't worth anything. But a lot of the vehicles today competing are totally different than my Buick or Rob's Honda.
Right.
Back in the day, Frank Rougeau's Honda, Wilson's Reaper, the Speaker Works Grand National that Richard ended up buying.
Right.
Those cars were all sound quality dragsters. You know what I mean?
Yep.
No holds bar, whatever you got to do to make it the best. And if you can't drive it down to the grocery store anymore, that's okay, because
Right.
it's a dragster meant to go as fast or sound as good as it can.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
All the stuff that Mark used to do to his 4Runner, the things I did to my car, just all the things, those all, those cars had one purpose, and that was to be the best sounding thing it could be, no matter how you do it. Well, nowadays, you don't see many of those type of vehicles with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a few out there, but for the most part, these guys, everybody, they need to drive their cars.
Right.
My BMW now, I've got a nice system in it, but I drive that car. You know what I mean? And
Right.
there's things I could do to make it better, but I can't, because it would take it off the road, and I need to drive it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of the difference in some of that stuff then to now.
Right. Right.
So they
Yeah,
both
it's-
have a place. So, back in the day, I can promise you, Big Daddy Don Garlitz didn't share people with the cool technology he had going on pistons and rods inside his engine. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
1 year at USAC Finals. So USAC Finals, they kind of, I'm trying to remember because it's been so long. It's kind of like you kind of had a time slot of when you would be judged.
Right.
And you needed to be there. And if you definitely were not at your car when the judges showed up,
You're out of luck.
Right.
Right.
You missed point. They would take points off. 1 year, I don't remember who it was. They had a tweeter failure or a mid-range failure. I think it was a tweeter. And I don't think it was a kicker competitor, but I'm over there helping them work on their car. Well, the judges show up to my car, and I'm not there. So right on my windshield, -5 on the score sheet. I'm like, you got to be kidding.
Right.
So I get back, and I feel fit because I'm like, that's 5 points.
Right.
And I'm like, man, I'm over there helping somebody else, and you're going to dock me. Anyway, so I won. I got best of show and everything that year. Ultimately, it all worked out and didn't matter. But not too much after the square woofer thing was released, I ended up going to work at Kicker. Joined with Mark and
Right.
John Myers and Aaron and Jeremy and Greg and Kendall and a bunch of guys. And one of the first projects there literally was Alma's Bronco. I don't know all the details on that Bronco's, past until it got there, but we were challenged with obviously trying to win and make that thing the loudest.
Right.
For the most part, the back end of that thing was pretty much done. We rebuilt all the interior to try to get maximum SPL and stuff. And it was a neat project and a neat vehicle. I mean, it was, as iconic of a vehicle as there is.
Sure. Absolutely.
There's on the top, if there's top 10, it's got to be one of them. And if there's a top 5, it's got to be there. And if there's a top 2, it should be one of them. I mean, very
Absolutely.
iconic vehicle. And Alma was a pretty amazing lady. I mean, she did a lot of stuff for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people didn't like her, people that had to compete against her or whatever. And, she could be crabby and let you know how she felt too.
She was competitive.
But it was cool. Alma, a school teacher, she loved people. She loved young people. And, a real school teacher finds a way to relate to her class and
Right.
that's what all competitors were. That was her class. So she found a way to relate to everybody. She helped a lot of people overcome obstacles, mentally, physically, financially, all kinds of things. I mean, she was just an absolute wonderful, wonderful lady.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've got tons of crazy stories that I could share about her. But we started, building her Bronco, and I don't remember really. I think Mark probably he's better at some of that stuff. I don't really remember all the numbers that we did, but it was loud. And it seems like there at the beginning, maybe we were pretty much the loudest or whatever, but then we just you hit a brick wall where, okay, that's as fast as we can go, no matter what.
Right.
It's what we got. This is the most it can be. And so that's kind of where we were at, and I think, Scott Owens with Pioneer and different people were doing different things and different larger vehicles, larger budgets, different things, which allowed them to just skyrocket and go through the moon when it came to SPL.
Right.
And so during that time at Kicker, that was an amazing time. I learned, so that's when I really started truly learning about audio and stuff, because, I was there at a factory. And at that time,
sure.
I mean, it was a
real factory. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, in our installation facility directly. So the building where we were at, our installation facility was originally a car dealership, like a Chevy dealership. And then Kicker built the big buildings around it. So we had an awesome install bay. We had a little paint booth. We had everything. But right behind a set of doors was our wood room. And behind that was speaker build, where they built the woofers. So as you can imagine, I mean, they're in Stillwater, so everybody is giant OSU fans. But for some reason, the guys in speaker build were all OU fans.
Oh,
so it was a fun rivalry there that everybody had. But at that time, I built the woofers in my car. I actually, myself, hand built them from
wow.
start to finish, magnetizing the motor all the way to everything. And I wanted to do it just because I would see those guys do it. It didn't look like it was really that big of a deal, but it was neat. I learned a lot about how a speaker works and the different things. Absolutely. At that time. That was a huge time in my career as far as that. And so then I built liquid cooled woofers for my car. And
oh wow.
It was amazing. I built these, we had these really large aluminum bowls that were built that surrounded the motor structure.
Okay.
And we machined some little billet pieces that sealed it off so that no liquid could go through the pole piece and up to the voice coil. When we built it, when we wound the voice coil, we underhung it so that the extra space that aluminum plate was going to add between the basket and the motor, we underhung the voice coil so it would center it back where it needed to be. And it was really, really an amazing deal. I still have that woofer. And I remember Randy Davis, one of the national sales guys, came down and saw me doing that. And he goes, "You need to throw that away right now." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Man, people are going to see that and they're going to want it, and we're going to have to start building them."
Did it make a difference as far as like the parameters over time? I mean, or what'd you find as far as the advantage?
When it was all said and done, it was basically, for lack of better terms, all of its specs were just like a stock woofer. At that time, you did anything you could to have point.
Absolutely.
And I probably had another $2,000 in part and stuff on those woofers to build them. We liquid cooled. Mark helped me. We liquid cooled my amplifiers. I mean, the list goes on. You were doing anything you could do
Absolutely,
to get creativity points at the time. And luckily, working at Kicker, they blessed us on anything we wanted to do, and for the most part, and we got to do it. And it was awesome.
So was that really about the time that you had the crazy paint job on the Regal with I think it was purple Kicker amps?
So that was later. So when I went to Kicker, the car was basically orange with some really mild, simple graphics on the side.
Right.
Right at that time, during that rebuild, I had a whole new paint job put on it with a bunch of They had a big Kicker logo on the side of it, and
That's right. That's
and
right.
graphics and skulls and bones and all kinds of stuff. So the car kind of took a little bit of a swing to the dark side during that time, which was really cool. And we were getting ready. So there was a big contest that Car Sound magazine had just launched, Terry Miller, and it was the Wild West Shootout out in Arizona.
That's right.
So I was just getting all that rebuild ready for that. Mark was rebuilding everything in his truck. We had just redone the back end of his truck with the big fiberglass shell that had his liquid cooled amps and stuff in the back end of it. And that was a really cool time, because that last couple weeks leading up to the show for us to go, Mark was going to go, I was going to go. It was started out to be like a $5,000 entry fee, winner take all.
Right.
And then I think when it was said and done, I think it was a $2,500 entry fee. I don't remember exactly. I got my cars done. I'm done. I'm helping Mark. And that last week, getting ready to go, every day, all day long, I'm working on Mark's truck. Mark's working on his truck. Greg Davis is working on his truck. Steve Irby, the owner of the company, is working on Mark's truck.
Wow.
Charlie was down there. He was basically ran daily operations. He was helping on the truck. It was really pretty amazing. And you can only imagine the commitment that Kicker had to competition at the time. That all hands on deck, everybody get down there and help do anything you can. It was really, really pretty cool. But then it got down to the end. I'm like, Mark, I don't think your truck's going to make it. He goes, Gary, I think the truck's going to make it. I'm like, Mark, I don't think your truck's going to make it. He's like, Gary, I think it's going to make it. I said, okay. I said, here's the deal. From Stillwater to Phoenix or Tempe or wherever it was we were going, I said, man, it is straight through. It's 26 hours. I said, so that means this rig has got to leave at whatever time. I said, so we'll work hard, but at X day, X moment, we are leaving.
Right.
So we humped it, and he didn't quite get his truck back together. So we loaded my car up, and we hit the trail. So we drove straight to Arizona. We did that show. And funny thing about that show, so it was Steve Brown with the BMW that he built. That was just over the top. Wilson had the Reaper. Phil Petrarca had his Mercedes. I had the Regal. And it seemed like there might have been one or two more guys. I don't remember. Anyway, so we all do this show, and it's cool because they got it set up on like the Diamondback baseball field there. Okay. And so they got, so everybody's set up, like I'm set up kind of at first base. Somebody was at third base. Somebody was at second base. A couple cars were kind of straddled home plate, Right. And it was it was during a big musical festival. So they had a big stage set up way out in center field for music. I mean, there was people in the stands. It was really a big deal. Terry did a great job of putting that thing together and turning it into a spectator event.
Right.
And so we had a microphone, and we gave our presentation to the crowd.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And so they did some neat stuff. The judges judged sound quality. I think there was, however many judges, 6 judges or whatever. They averaged scores. They dropped low score. They dropped high score. They did different things. They did installation. They did and then they did a fit and finish, which was kind of new because we all had custom cars basically. So it was like, how well does everything, that was a whole nother category, how well everything fit and all that. And so then the presentation was a big deal. We did our presentation. Well, the whole time Greg Davis is like, dude, got to start your car. Got to start your car. That'll be huge for the crowd. Right. I'm like, no, because it's still NASCAR loud.
Right.
I'm like, no. He goes, you got to do it. I'm like, all right. So I gave a presentation. I talked all about the audio system. I talked about, everything I did with the paint and the engine. So I was able to talk about stuff that really none of the other competitors were able to talk about.
Right.
Because, they didn't, some of that stuff they hadn't done. So, so Greg talked to me into starting the car. So at that time I had a 383 stroker motor, and the transmission had a 4,000 RPM stall converter. So, for the guys out there that may not know or understand what that is, basically you start the car and you can sit there and rev it up, and until you get to almost 4,000 RPM, the car doesn't roll.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can be revving at 2,500 or 3,000 RPM, and the car may just be sitting perfectly still. So the whole thing is it's part of, allowing you to be able to launch and, drag racers, what have you. So I start the car, no big deal, and I'm revving it up a little bit. And Greg's like giving me this nod like, man, you're a wuss. Rev it up. So, man, I just hammered down on it, and I revved it hard. Well, when I did, obviously I must have got close to that 4,000 RPM area, and the car somehow was in reverse.
Oh, no.
So when I revved it up hard, that thing did about a 10-foot burnout in reverse.
Were you
God.
at least sitting in the car, or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So imagine, the hood's open, the trunk is
Right.
open, the two doors are wide open, and I'm just kind of sitting on the seat half kind of sideways with one foot on the ground and one foot on the gas pedal, and I hit the gas and I'm revving it up. And so the next thing you know, man, I'm doing about literally 8 or 10 foot burnout in reverse.
Oh, no.
Dude, the crowd went crazy. It was ridiculous. It was pretty awesome.
Scary, but awesome.
Yeah. When it was all said and done, I won the show, beat Wilson. So I'll say that again. I beat Wilson. Let me say it one more time.
By the way, in case nobody heard it.
By the way, no, Wilson's a great guy. And you know what? He was very helpful. He gave me lots of sound and install tips and things throughout the way. I mean, again, another great guy. Won that show, and that was a huge deal because that was that was a huge deal.
Right.
Some of the very, a handful of the top cars that if somebody's going to mention or talk about, we were them. So that was a big deal. So on the way home, so the whole time we were there, Mark acted like he didn't feel very good. And I'm thinking, man, he's just bummed because he didn't get his car.
Right, sure.
He didn't get that truck here.
Sure.
Well, on the way home, he's feeling worse and worse, and he's not able to help me drive. And I'm like, man, crazy, what's going on? Well, he was really hurting. So when we got to Stillwater, I took him to the hospital.
Oh, man.
And he had an emergency gallbladder surgery. Like that night, yeah. Just crazy. Crazy. So
no rest for the wicked.
Mark, yeah, well, it's true. And Mark's a great friend. We go way back. I mean,
right.
Before I went to work at Kicker, we were great friends. The whole time we were there, we traveled the country and worked every day together as great friends. And then sometime after that, maybe about 2003, I think, we got to talking to the guys at Harman. They were wanting to kind of relaunch their 12-volt brand.
Right.
They had, from the way I understand, I don't know exact details, but for the most part, they basically quit doing business in 12-volt for maybe 6 months or so as they relaunched the brand. They rehired reps, and they hired Mark and I to do a couple things. A, to compete, rebuild our vehicles and compete.
Right.
B, kind of be the liaison between the national sales guys and the reps around the U.S. We traveled and did lots of trainings and stuff for dealers. And then eventually we ended up going overseas. Mark and I, we did a big travel trip across Asia, literally from I think maybe South Korea down to Indonesia. I mean, the entire continent.
Wow.
So our time at Harman was awesome. When we rebuilt our cars, our main job was, Gary, Mark, rebuild your cars, and when they're done, we'll launch everything else. So we literally every day
you just work on your
went
build
to the shop, and we worked on our cars for 6 or 8 months.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it was awesome. I mean, I'm not going to say we had open checkbook to do what we want to do, but Chris basically told us, don't skimp on anything.
Right.
Do everything you need to do. If there's a 5-cent part or a 10-cent part, if the 10-cent part will do the job better, then get the 10-cent part.
Right.
So we kind of did. So when we hit the road with our new JBL builds, I mean, that was when. So you can only imagine. My car went from orange with Kicker on the side of it and everything, to now it was another frame off job where we. The frame was a candy apple red before. Now it's tread plate airbrush. The entire car is now purple with the kind of a B-52 World War II bomber paint scheme.
That was cool.
And Mark's 4Runner went with more of a stealth fighter paint scheme. And then throw in, during that time, Alma joined Team JBL. And so we started building a whole new Bronco. A lot of people thought it was her red Bronco, but we went and found another Bronco, painted it silver. We cut the entire bottom out of that thing, lifted it about 18 inches, built a whole new subframe under it, launched to do an SPL build in it. And the thing was ridiculously loud. And when we got it done, it was probably capable of being the loudest vehicle at the time. But like Scott showed up with his Pioneer truck, at a contest or so that we didn't attend. He did 180 dB or something. We weren't 180 dB. And so Harman, the initiative was, we can't have a pit crew working on this truck forever.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it kind of went from, and during that time, IASCA was trying to launch Basebox, which was loud SPL and loud SQ and everything. So that's when it kind of got redone. The interior got revamped, and it had a sound quality type interior front stage built into it. That thing, the alternator bracket that's on the front of that thing that holds all those, I cut that out by hand on the router table at the shop.
Wow.
I mean, it was just ridiculous.
Wow.
And I had just got my car back from the paint shop, parked about 4 foot away from our wood table, which we built an 8x8 wood table with a table saw on one side of it and a couple routers in the other side of it. And I remember that big chunk of aluminum, 4 foot by 4 foot, and I've got it it's maybe half done, and it got loose, and it started just kind of wobbling and warping on that router. Oh. And I'm thinking, man, this thing's going to fly off like a frisbee
straight into your car, right?
Yeah. So I literally just kind of fell forward and jumped on that big old aluminum plate, and Mark came over and turned the router off.
Take me, not the car.
It was just, yeah. Another funny story. I was building the little console for the Buick. I mean, it was literally the last thing that I needed to do before we were going to hit the road and go to a show. And so I built this little dongle shaped console, and it's like, man, I want this thing done now. So I build it up. I stretch some fleece on it. I cover it with resin. I put it inside a cardboard box. I cut a round hole in the cardboard box, and I shove a heat gun in that hole. So I'm thinking, I'm going to warm this thing up so it'll cure. Well, 5 minutes later, Mark, I'm outside doing something. All I hear Mark doing is hollering, fire, fire, fire. That box and that thing had literally blew up and was on fire over on the wood table. So I run inside. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't fire extinguisher. Who knew where it was or if we even had one? So all I knew to do is I ran up and I kicked it. And when I kicked it, it just it immediately extinguished itself. Wow. It was weird.
Who knew?
So yeah. So then I turned around. I built another console just like it, but I didn't put it in a heat box. So as you can imagine, the list of goofy, crazy stuff like that goes on and on and on.
How long were you at Harman?
So I was at Harman from about, I think
because you were involved with the MS8 and stuff too as well, right?
Yeah. About 2003 to I think around 2011.
Okay, so quite a while.
8 years ago or so, something like that. So during that time, after we started competing and doing all of our things, we, for lack of better terms, we had a real job to do. So part of my job was working between the sales staff and engineering guys and marketing and everything between the U.S. and Asia. So I spent a lot of time overseas working with all of our distributors and our salespeople over there. And during that time, Andy was... So let me back up just a little bit. At the very beginning of our Harman time, Andy had some amplifiers. And these were programmable amplifiers that had DSP built into them. Some of them were for factory amps that would have been in Hyundai or some of the different OEM vehicle projects that Harman had. Right. So the processing EQs and stuff that we had in Alma's Bronco was 2 Hyundai amplifiers that we could plug into, and we could set the crossovers and delay and EQ and everything.
Right.
So that was kind of the groundwork that led into the MS8.
Okay.
So it just made sense to have, to be able to do it all, electronically and
Right.
everything. And it made sense, obviously, at that time. The manufacturers are putting all that stuff in the amplifiers. So Andy is a real bright guy, and seeing forward, saw that was a direction that we needed to go.
Right.
So he really, really, really worked hard and pioneered all of that. And so the MS-8 project was launched. And originally, I believe, I'd have to look through some emails and notes, but I think that it had a couple names. And I think the Fix It, or the, different, we had all different kinds of names. It landed on MS-8. I have the original, one of the original amps that we were using. Several of our competitors had those amps that were programmable.
Okay.
Mike Latcher, I think he had one. Several competitors had them in their cars, and they all did well with them. So the Team JBL was a little bit of a, kind of sort of a test bed for that.
Right.
And then when the MS-8 became more of a real product, I have the very original one that doesn't look anything similar to what they actually ended up looking like.
Right.
And so that was an amazing project, amazing product. It was a little bit ahead of its time, because now look around, just about every factory, every manufacturer that is, legit in the industry has some sort of a tool that did similar things.
Sure,
with MSA
sure.
did. But at the time, probably, I feel like it was a little bit ahead of its time in the aspect that installers were at that time very used to doing everything themselves. They were used to setting crossovers, setting time alignment, setting the EQ, level matching, doing everything themselves, doing the tuning. And a lot of guys in the country believe they are experts in all of that. So when the MS-8 came along and it did almost all of that automatic,
Hey.
I feel like, hey, you're taking, we heard it. Hey, I get paid to do all that stuff. And man, I get it. That doesn't mean you can't still charge, but instead of charging $75 an hour for 8 hours, charge $400 an hour and let the MS-8 do the work. You know what I mean? So there's lots of ways of looking at that. The MS-8, though, was a pretty remarkable piece, and it still is. And anybody that downplays it, there's no reason to, because it was a great piece. If Harman was launching it today, it would probably be different in a couple ways. I think you do need to have the ability for kind of a backdoor access, so that if an installer wanted to adjust some of those parameters himself, that he could do it as a manual box, or let it be an auto tune box. So, but it was a pretty cool piece. A lot of guys used it. A lot of guys still use it. I still see, posts all the time, guys asking about MS-8 and stuff like that. But what's funny and interesting, and if my wife was here, she could tell you, even my youngest daughter could probably do the same thing. I don't know how many tech calls I fielded in the U.S. and overseas explaining how to do the setup, because it's really simple. Everybody wanted to make it too difficult, and nobody wants to read the manual. So, I was constantly over the phone walking guys through setup.
Right.
Well, my wife was joking one time, and she recited the setup to me. Then my kid, Kendall at 5 years old, she was joking, and she recited the setup.
You have a full tech support team. See, hey, they need an MS-8.
Right.
MS-8 call. Here you go. Go.
Yeah, exactly. So then, and I still competed, all the way through the JBL years. But what's interesting is through that whole time, it starts leading up to, some of the things of the present day. A lot of the distributors and the people that I met and that Andy and I met, around the world, it was a big joke. You guys need your own brand. You need your own brand.
Right.
And we would laugh it off. And then there came a point where, Andy and Marcus and I, we got some, a little bit of financial backing, and we launched Audio Frog. And at the time, one of the things that Andy and I did, we sat down, and instead of sitting there thinking about all the things that we wanted out of a speaker we thought about all the things that we didn't want. And what I mean by that is, working at Harman and working, Andy was, a product manager of a lot of the products, and then me kind of being, hooked to Andy's right arm, kind of being, right there along with it. You're always handcuffed. You can't do this. You can't do that.
Right.
For multiple reasons. And it's generally financially, you know what I mean? Hey, that adds, 25 cents to manufacturing, which adds X amount of dollars to retail.
Right.
So you're always limited to what you can do. So one of the things we set out for was no limits.
Right.
And so, the first thing we did, because Andy comes from an install background, that was always my background, is we sat down and worked on a lot of the installation parts of the product. And Andy had a lot of great ideas on a lot of the parts that are used. One of the things that I was always disgruntled with as an installer was when it comes time to mount a tweeter in the top of the door panel, nobody out there ever had a tweeter that would fit the hole of the hole saw that you use to cut the hole. You cut the hole and
it's
it's
slightly
always
off.
A little bit. Yeah, it's always smaller than the speaker. So you got to go in there and start hacking at it with your knife or something. Or it's larger, and now the tweeter sits in there and wiggles around and never really fits right. So that was one of the first things that we did, is we made sure that everything's mounting diameter was relevant to the tools and the parts that installers use to mount stuff. So when you use a circle saw to cut a hole for the tweeter fits perfect.
Right.
Stuff like that. So that was a really neat thing to be a part of, launching that brand. And then here we are today. There's probably a whole lot of stuff all the way in between there that I have forgotten about. But that really is my time in the industry from 1987 to 2018. And now I work for a rep firm here in our territory, which is Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma. I'm on a daily basis. I talk to guys that I've known from this region, forever.
Right.
I got, all my friends are 12 volt audio friends. We have friends, all over the country, all over the world. I trade text messages and phone calls and emails and everything with guys literally all over the world on a weekly or daily basis. So it's really cool. I can't, I've been super lucky. IASCA back in the day invited, me to go over to Japan and judge finals over there one time.
Right.
Harry Kimura, myself, and Todd Matsubura, we all went overseas. Another time, myself and Larry Tribell went overseas. I don't know if you know Larry, but a great guy.
I don't know Larry, no.
If you ever meet him or anything, ask him about being on the level floor, maybe the 59th floor above the clouds in Hong Kong. I mean, just crazy. So, and then Kicker, able to travel.
Right.
JBL obviously took me all over the world. So I don't know of any other career that I could have had that would have allowed me to travel like I've been able to travel, to meet the people that I know.
Yep.
And it's kind of odd. I mean, there's more people that know me than people that I know. So which is cool. We were just at SEMA, last week, and saw people that I hadn't seen forever, met people that knew who I was or met me a long time ago that I, forgot about knowing or didn't know, and reacquainted. And so it's just really, really, really awesome. And just different things over the years when we would be out to Greenville or whatever for finals, Mark and we'd stop off at Richard's shop.
Right.
I remember when I pulled my car into his big shop and it was Kicker orange and painted. He literally looked at me, looked at my car, looked at me, looked at my car, and shook his head like, I can't believe you did that to a Regal.
What's your problem?
Yeah. What's your malfunction, boy? So awesome. Richard's got, I don't know. If I said 100, he might have 50 or he might have 500, but he's got tons of Regals. Grand National GNXs, the Speakerworks Grand National that he bought. I mean, it just, some of that stuff is just, you're just in awe when you're sitting there going, man, can I touch that?
Yeah.
You
Hey,
know,
you want to talk? You want to talk
and
about pack rats? He'll put you to shame. I promise.
yeah, well, exactly. You know, and he gave me gave me is a strong word. He loaned me a DBX processor for my car one time, and I was like, man, I'll buy it. He goes, no, it ain't for sale, but I'll loan it to you. You know, I'll loan it to you until I need it
Right.
back, which will probably be never.
I think Eldridge
You know,
said the same thing about some of the Altec horns, and he's like, "Yeah, Richard loaned me
yeah,
a set of Altec horns that I still have."
exactly. You know, and Richard, in the industry, the guy has caught. I think we all, at some time, we all catch grief.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You have your lovers and you have
Yeah,
your haters.
anybody that does something is out to get you somehow. It seems so.
Right. And Richard, he and David came onto the scene at a good time where
absolutely.
our industry needed people to help teach
Right.
and explain stuff, and so they did. And Richard's got the AMP challenge and some stuff out there, and a lot of people don't really realize what that's all about. And he gets a bad rap sometimes from some of that. But man, the guy's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's and I've got to say that in general, there's a lot of people out there that you may not like, but once you become friends with them, then man, that's a nice guy. You know what I mean? Nobody's an asshole on purpose. Well, maybe there probably are.
Well,
some.
I mean, competition kind of brings out the worst and best in us, right? But
well, it does.
But I would absolutely agree that anybody in this industry at all, I know a lot of people definitely, there's a lot of ego involved, more so than most industries. I mean, there's a lot of passion involved. It's, I have a engineering background in structural engineering, and everything is very, I was in that industry for 15 years, and everything is very straight laced, and it's one of those things where you either do your job or you don't, and there's not a lot of wiggle room there. But in this, there's a lot of opinion, there's a lot of subjectivity as far as what you bring to it, and of course on the competition side there's a whole lot of ego, and on the industry side as well. And I think everybody wants to be right, but there's not a guidebook for this per se.
Right.
And even in pro audio, I mean, pro audio is more straight laced, but the same things happen there, and there's a lot of discussion on these things. Really, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's really why I've really gotten enamored with doing what we're doing right now and doing these interviews, because once you hear somebody out and hear their full perspective and their story, everything in the middle starts making sense.
Right.
And I would say the same thing. I mean, Richard, a lot of people don't like Richard because he challenges you literally to think outside of what your perspective is and why you're doing the things you're doing, and bring them down to fact instead of your feeling. And that's kind of like talking politics or religion to people. If you challenge the way they look at the world, they're going to get upset at some point. But I think the ones who push through that and really get to the end have an enormous amount of potential for growth in their own experience. And that's certainly what I've been fortunate enough to have happen with my period of time in this industry as well, with people like you and the people who have kind of protected the industry, I would say, to a certain degree, and kept it moving forward. We have you guys to thank for that, and it's certainly appreciated. And I know there's not a big bank account that goes along with it, and there's not a fame and fortune, but I don't think any of us would trade it for any other experience.
Well, and you're right. And it's something you just said a moment ago sparked this little thought that I just had. At this past SEMA, I was walking through kind of between the North Hall and the Central Hall, and I'm walking and I've got my backpack over my left shoulder, and it weighs probably 50 pounds because it's full of lit and different stuff. And to my back right side, I keep feeling somebody like up on me, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And we're crowded, but I'm thinking we're not that crowded.
Get off.
And I'm about to turn around and like give somebody the wicked eye. So we're walking through there, and I'm thinking, all right, I get it. And as soon as and I got one of the guys I work with, Jimmy Bradfield. He's with me, so he's just kind of to the left of me, and and I nudge him, and I'm thinking, like, hey, slow down in case I turn around and this guy wants to
throw down,
jump in my business or something. And I barely look over as soon as I start looking to the right, that person, I must have slowed down a pace. And so they were able to catch like right beside me, and it's Richard Petty.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, oh, that was literally, I was so starstruck. I was trying to tell Jimmy, and I couldn't, you know what I mean? Well, yes, it was just like that. It was the weirdest, craziest, funniest, weirdest feeling. And so then what I do? I'm trying to walk and get up in the middle of his business. You know what I mean? I'm trying to catch him.
Let me return the favor.
But it was so awesome.
Wow.
I was so starstruck by it. And I'm not even a big NASCAR guy. You know,
Petty's.
I watch it when there's nothing else on. I'll watch it. You know, my father-in-law is big with it, and I have a lot of friends that are over the top. But this is a guy who trended that industry. You know,
absolutely.
What I'm saying? And so there's a lot of guys in our industry that, you know, a lot of times I'm just naive to it. You know, that look up to, hey, you know, Gary was a big pioneer in the realm of competition and doing this and that and whatever. So it's everybody views everybody a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
You know, that's kind of back what I was saying earlier. You know, when you get to know somebody, so much easier to be friends and be buddies and all that kind of stuff. And like, you know, my best friends are car audio guys.
Yep.
I mean, it's just that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's pretty awesome. I mean, like I was kind of alluding earlier, there's not another industry or another job field that I can think of that I could have ever been involved in that would allow me to travel and meet the people and be, you know, a lot of times guys will ask me, man, what do I got to do to be able to do what you've done? And I'm like, well, first of all, when I got into audio, 1987, it was still in its infancy.
Right.
I mean, people are doing, nowadays installers, you've got to know how to integrate into just about any vehicle out there. You know what I mean? You got to know how to, but back when I was first installing, 90% of the Hondas didn't even come with a radio. It was a radio delete.
Right. So
you had to put a radio.
Right.
And then all Chevy trucks and everything, we were keeping the factory radio. We were also adding high level converters and stuff and converting. So we were integrating back in. In fact, I was looking at an old magazine not too long ago, and it showed a line out converter, how you can integrate into any vehicle. This is like from, the late 90s or something. And so it's funny how the industry has kind of come full circle where I started out where every install required some kind of integration, or we knew that we had to run an extra ground wire from the radio to the back or this or that because we're going to have ground loop noises or something. Mm-hmm. So we just, that was just part of the install. We knew it. So it's really pretty awesome how it all works out. So all the years of my installation and stuff, I help my retailers that I deal with on a daily basis. I help them all the time on, different integration stuff. And it's really allowed me to, even though I'm not in the install bay and I'm not actively installing on all the common cars every day, a lot of what you need to know or need to do is the same. So it's fun to be able to help these guys.
Absolutely.
And share the information and all of that stuff. It's pretty awesome.
So are we
pretty awesome.
Are we going to see you in the competition lanes at any point in the future?
Well, there is a contest coming up this next spring, and I have plans of having 2 vehicles there, personal vehicle and a vehicle for a friend of mine that I've been working on for absolutely forever, it seems like.
I think it's only been like a year, so I'm just going to go with that.
So funny.
We're not talking about you, ago, Mickey.
Yeah, no, Mickey. So years ago, obviously, I've known Mickey for a long time. Met him at
spring break Padre many, many, many years ago. And this was a guy, I mean, he cracked me up because I don't know how old he was, but he was a young guy at the time. And he's got his car parked in the lane, but he's out on a four-wheeler running up and down the ocean. And I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. But here I am. I'm wound up knee deep in competing.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
So this is just a guy who kind of appeared to be no care in the world. You know what I mean? And so I really liked him and kind of gravitated to him almost immediately. And I met his mom. I mean, she was a super cool lady. So anyways, it was just really awesome. So I've been, around Mickey for forever, and he always had a great car. I mentioned Larry Tribell earlier. Larry, I think, did most of the initial or all the build on Mickey's car at different points of time. Larry was a great, great installer, and he used to work with Mark Fukuda and took over Fukuda's store back when Fukuda sold it.
Okay.
So Larry's one of the best. Though he's been out of the installation, out of the retail business for a while, he now runs the 12-volt cells for a big distributor down in Houston. But Larry, I've always regarded him as one of the best. I mean, super great with details and such. But anyways, Mickey and I, obviously became better friends, see each other at shows and stuff like that. We competed against each other, at different times. But there was one finals where he had the back of his car, he had a crack or something, a crack or a scratch or something in the fiberglass, right by the latch area. So I'm not sure where it came from, if he had it or if he went and bought it, if I had it or if some other competitor had it, but somebody had some black tape. And I don't think it was electric tape. I think it was more like, like vinyl tape,
right,
like you would do graphics and stuff.
Right.
So I helped him and we worked on it and we fixed it basically. And you can't even tell. I mean, we repaired it. So I think Mickey, that was a turning point where he's like, man, I can't believe this guy just, that has helped me with my car. And I think we even are going to be competing against each other.
Nice.
That type of deal. So it was a cool deal. It was really a time frame. So the best of my memory, Mickey may remember it a little bit different. But that was definitely a time that allowed, kind of bridged our friendship or whatever. So right after that, he's like, man, I want you to rebuild my car. And so we were at CES, and we were all at CES in January, and it was, we were at, I think maybe the Stratosphere or something, gambling, goofing off. And that's when we talked about it. So after that, we got home, he brought his car to me. And, at that time I told him, I said, man, I can't promise you how quick I can do it or how long it'll do it, but I'll get it done as quick as I can. And I was excited. I wanted to, and I did, we tore it apart and I got right on it. But then a few things changed. That was, I went from, one aspect of my job to another and just different things that happened.
Right.
And then we have something called the internet
Yeah.
and Facebook. And that, I'll tell you, has been the worst thing for me when it comes to his car. And here's why. I'm not in the install bay every day, and I've not been able to hone my creativity and my ability like,
Right.
over all the years as if I was still installing. So I'm a little bit slower than I once was, but I see super cool stuff that
I want to do that.
Or
I want to do that.
this guy or that guy does. Right. So it goes from, all right, I got door panels that are practically built to,
I want to redo the door panels.
yeah, I got to do something cool. It goes from, a dash that at that time would have been as super cool as anybody could have imagined.
Right.
But today it wouldn't be. It'd still be cool, but not quite that cool.
Yeah.
So I've rebuilt many parts of that car several times over. And I'm at a point now finally where I think that it's pretty cool and it's time to, stick the fork in it. And I've added a lot of the new techniques and stuff that I've seen and learned that a lot of guys are doing over the last several years. So in one way, it sucks that I've had his car a long time. On the other hand, it's pretty cool that it's like almost done.
Right.
And when it's done, granted, I could have probably built 10 cars that would have been great all in that amount of time, but when it's done, it'll be super cool. There's nobody out there that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's somebody that's got that 15-year itch project in their bay. But for the most part, when it comes to competitors in the lanes today, there's nobody that's got a vehicle that is purpose-built drag race, SQ drag racer
Right.
on the circuit like Mickey's car is going to be when it comes
That's
out.
awesome. And that's what
You know
that's
what I
what we
mean?
need more of.
Purpose-
I mean,
Yeah, purpose built to be the best sounding thing that it can be. If something is wrong, it's going to be because I didn't know better. If something, you know what I mean? Obviously, anybody's going to be able to look at it and go, man, I might would have done something a little different,
Sure.
or they could have done this, that. But nobody's going to be able to sit there and go, man, why did they cheese out on that? Why did they cheese out on that? Because there's nothing being cheesed
right.
out.
The effort is there regardless.
Right. I talk to Mickey all the time. About half the time he's giving me shit about it, and other half the time we talk about fishing and guns
Right.
and goofy politics and different things going on, and we there's there's guys out there that competing that think they have the best car in the world, and you know what, maybe right now they do, but Mickey's car is super cool. It's going to be really cool. It's really close to being done. I'm going to have plenty of time to hopefully have it tuned and sounding great before it has to debut.
Right.
Versus in the past, we all know how you are working to the last minute, and then you're racing to the show, and then you're trying to tune it that morning. And then if you don't do well, all you're doing is backpedaling and making excuses for, we just got it fired up last night.
Right.
Just tuned it today.
Right.
We're not going to do
Right.
that. And I told Mickey, I said, when it's done, it'll be 100%. Just like, like my Buick, whenever it got done from when we rebuilt it for JDL, that's it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I never rebuilt or never touched another thing on that car. I mean, it is the same because you know what? It was all done right.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that. So he's going to it's going to be a great car. A lot of guys that have been, joking and poking about it taking a long time, they're going to wish that I was still working on it when they see it.
Well, I think it's
because it's going to take,
it's
it's going to take their trophy away from them. I'm joking.
I think it's awesome that you're doing that, and I think a lot of what you talked about, there's a lot of truth in the time period and changes and doing it, because I mean, no matter what, you have in your mind, especially, you have this, I have to do as well or better than I did the last time. I need to continue what I've done with my name and everything else. And I think it's hard for a lot of the guys who have been doing this for a long time, who have been out for a little while, to get over that barrier of entry of, I've got to do this in order to respect myself enough to do it. Yeah.
Well, you're right. And there's a recent, call it an article for lack of better terms, on Facebook that everybody's engaging in at the moment, talking about, people that compete or don't compete and judges and different things. And so, a lot of time judges come under fire, but what we all have to realize is it's all subjective and it's an opinion. And you got to kind of respect that. And we all like different levels of makeup on our wives or girlfriends or whatever, you know what I mean? So everybody has a different opinion of what they like or what they don't like. Sound quality judges, they all hear things a little bit differently, but they all hear, to them, they hear everything the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? Judge A hears everything the same. Judge B hears everything the same, even though they may hear things a little bit differently. And so, I used to keep my picture book, my photo book, install log book, and then I would also keep another log book that had all my 4 sheets and notes and stuff. So you knew that if this judge was judging your car, they liked heavier bass, or this guy doesn't like as much bass.
Right.
This guy seems to like the highs to be a little bit more louder or bright. And it's simply because that's how they hear. So you have to be able to make changes on your car from show to show. It would be ridiculous to be the Dallas Cowboys, where, the average temperature at one of their football games, let's just say, through the winter is in the 50s or whatever, and then them go to Green Bay and not take any extra thermal clothing or whatever.
Right.
Or if they're used to playing on turf, and it would be silly for them to wear their turf shoes out to, San Francisco or wherever where it's a grass field. So you've got to adapt and change to your surroundings. And that's the same thing with competition. You got to adapt and change. I mean,
But that's where I think that the teams have been everybody downplays the teams, but I think that's where the teams really become valuable, because there's a lot of information that can go, back and forth depending on the region of where someone is. And if they're experiencing that judge all year round, but you live in Florida or New Mexico or whatever, and you've never experienced that judge, then you know kind of what to expect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then there comes a point when you get your car done or dialed in, or where it's close enough, and then leave it alone. And that's one of the things that I learned when I was at Harman. So Harman has a big team of trained listeners. And these are people that are there in the office, people from some of the buildings and businesses that are around their office there in the complex. They've got a lot of data and a lot of science behind what people like to hear and what they don't like to hear. And so I learned a whole lot during that time on, how to tune the car to what people like. There's, as we all know, there's certain frequencies that will tear anybody up. Then there's certain frequencies that you can boost, cut, or do whatever you want, and it doesn't hardly affect anything.
Right.
So I think when you know all of that, then that's beneficial and it helps. But you know what? Nobody learns that on day one.
No.
It takes a lot of help. The teams, you have people that can share and experience that, with each other. A lot of times, here's a funny thing, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but it doesn't matter. A lot of people would ask me, man, what's the number one thing that helps you in being, in winning? What helps you in being a great competitor or whatever? And the one thing I would say is I said, well, when I competed for many, 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 many years, I would have a little tape recorder under the seat of my car, recording everything that the judges had to say when they were in my car.
Right, because you had two judges that were in there talking to each other during the process.
Right. And so what's funny about that is you learn what they're listening. You know what I mean? You learn what they are listening for.
Right.
On a certain track, they're listening for this. Well, I may have just been tuning that track to sound good, but maybe it's not about how it sounds. Maybe as we know, they're listening just for a certain piece of mid bass or a certain this or that, on a certain track. So once you learn all that, then that's how, very helpful information. And then you learn lots of other stuff too. But
but hey, we'll have to have a 27-part series of Gary's tapes here one of these days. It's funny because obviously I've been putting a lot of thought into the same issue, and I'm kind of working on a response to that. But every judge, it's not that the criteria isn't set. There's a score sheet, there's a rule book, everything is pretty clear on how it is. But every judge has, after entering thousands of score sheets over the years of, judges' score sheets into the scoring systems, every judge has a cadence. Every judge kind of has a signature pattern to what they do. And every judge has the certain thing that they're really looking for.
Yeah.
So, it's not a matter, this isn't judges aren't cookie cutter computers that are, made of a database that are critically looking at every single, they're filling out a complete score sheet, but really most judges are really focused on one portion of the score sheet, whatever that is for them. And that's where if your goal is simply to be the best or simply to get a first place trophy, then you're probably not going to be very happy doing this.
Right.
Think about like all the people who make their own barbecue, for example. I mean, I do it, and I do it because I enjoy waking up early in the morning and making my own barbecue, sauce or whatever, and then making some ribs and having a good day. I it's not important enough to me to go out and compete with other people that do barbecue competitions. You know what I mean? I just enjoy my barbecue. Okay, that's cool. But the people who go out and do the barbecue competitions and use that to leverage for their business or themselves or whatever, I mean, they have to understand that they're going in and different people have different taste palettes, and you're kind of getting a consensus of opinion. And it's the same thing we do here. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But at the same time, I can't claim that I have the world's best barbecue because I haven't never competed against anybody else.
Well, or you just haven't had enough people taste it to tell you that.
I should just ask the right people.
Right.
But anyway.
No, I agree exactly. Everybody. So just yesterday, I was riding with a buddy, and he owns a store, and I do some business with him, and he was playing his system, and he's like, man, it sounds really good. And I'm like, yeah, it does sound good. And then, but everything, his processor's controlled from a tablet. We're going down the road. I grabbed his tablet and made just a couple little changes, and it sounds so much better.
Right.
So, we all hear and feel, if I was judging him, he thinks it sounds great, and I would judge him. Maybe he wouldn't get his score as high in a certain category or whatever.
Right.
Back to, people claiming if they got the best of whatever, that's all relevant. And at the end of the day, I don't know of just about any industry, any sport or anything that anybody can claim to have the best of something if it doesn't go in competition against others.
Right.
You know
And then you have to accept those rules,
Right. Personal opinion doesn't, like you said, barbecue, you could go around and give some samples away to all your neighbors on your street, and they could all say, man, this is the best barbecue I've ever had. Well, that doesn't mean it's the best barbecue in the world. It's just the best barbecue those people have had.
Well, and on top of that, you have to be something to compare it.
Right.
Right. Everybody wants to, for whatever reason, there's been this, push that we only judge to the score sheet and to the rules and blah 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 blah. Okay, that's a nice opinion, but really it's about which car was the best that day.
Comparing. You have to compare.
Exactly. And I mean, we can all attempt to go by the rules and by the rule book and judge the score sheet however much you want to say that, but at the end of the day, it's all about what happened that day.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, and I've had many conversations with Mark about this and different things about different judges back in the day, who we thought were great judges and stuff. And in my opinion, strictly my opinion, the best judges that I ever thought that I had were not necessarily people that I would respect as great installers.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Or even great tuners. In fact, some of these people can't help you tune your system to save their life.
But they can tell you what sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, they are great about distinguishing this car from this car from this car.
Yep. And that's one of the things I find really frustrating when guys are like, and again, this is why I like doing what we're doing now, because it helps people learn the whole story about the people involved. But it's not necessary for somebody to have had an awesome car. It's not necessary for somebody to have 3 world championships. It's not necessary for somebody to have a $25,000 reference system in their home to be a good judge.
Right.
And there are judges, there are installers, there are tuners, there are competitors, and those are all different people. Some are very good, but just because you have a good sounding car doesn't mean that you're going to make a great judge, and just because you're a great competitor doesn't mean you're going to be a great judge. It's one of those things where we all end up kind of in that path where most of the time people go from being competitor to judge to whatever, but it's not a necessary path, I guess.
Right. You're right, and I've gone to Venezuela, Brazil, Mexico City, all across Asia. And I've judged and I've judged and I've judged. And I can tell you, anybody that hasn't judged and judged on a a real scale, you don't have your opinion means nothing because it's difficult. It
Right.
is super difficult. I will rarely shed a negative opinion on a judge or anything, because there's so many variables. I can tell you one time being in Indonesia and judging a contest that had about around 60 cars in 2 different classes, and there comes a point where every car sounds just like the car I just listened to. You know what I mean? It's very, very tough. So now you have no choice but to start honing in on a detail here or a detail there or a detail here or a detail there.
Right.
And part of that is as installers and salespeople and competitors and tuners and everybody gets better, then you start reaching a target. You know what I mean? And things, may start sounding a whole lot better, but it's tough. Anybody that wants to sit down and challenge, good seasoned judges, you're barking up a wrong tree in my book, because it's tough.
The other problem is that we need more judges. We need judges who are involved. We need judges who are good. And just because a judge has an issue their first or second time out doesn't mean fire that judge. It means work with that judge, be a teacher, and find ways to it's like, I'm sure you've done however many classes on tuning as well, right? And let's say you've trained 10,000 people on tuning sans CS8 or MS8. I'm talking like real tuning. And how many of those 10,000 people that you might teach tuning over a weekend, let's say, can go out Monday morning and do an advanced tune and do it right based on that 2-day training? Very few, I would say.
Right.
It's going to be a very small percentage of people, because it's not, hearing things, and even if you're hands-on a little bit and whatever else, doesn't make it so. You need to get experience. It's the same with anything you do in life. It's the same with reference systems. When people, say, oh, we need this one reference. There is no one reference. Getting a reference requires experience of, hearing similar tracks on 1,000 different systems. It's not about one. There is no one reference. That's where when you start attacking the judges or the system or variables without understanding the complete story and without understanding the all the complexities involved, you're really just attacking the people involved, and it's not cool.
Well, you're right. That's true. That's very true. And that's what I think is happening right now, and it's just not necessary, it's just not. I think we take a hobby, car audio,
right,
and we turn it, eventually it becomes, we get passionate about it, and then you decide, you want to do a little competition and stuff. Everybody is looking for a kind of a positive result, and that's why,
sure,
eventually it turned into having, some hardcore classes, into having dozens of classes, trying to make it fun for everyone.
Right.
And, and I'm against that as well. I think that if we, to revive.
How do I stack up overall? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's revive everything and have, 5 classes or whatever, and make it competitive. Now every class has got a big handful of competitors in it. I remember a long time ago when I think I asked, it might've been USAC. I think I asked that started it, was kind of like, what did they call it? Oh, I kind of lost my sense of thought. Basically I always looked at it like this. Like in a regular car show, you have an unfinished class. What do you call that?
Like an in progress type. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The guy that, it's just trucks in primer and,
right.
Maybe his interior ain't done.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Whatever, what do you call that class? Anyways, I always felt like back when IASCA started the 1-seat class,
like the street classes,
that was what that should have been. Yeah, the 1-seat street class stuff. That was like the beginning level. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is the first step. You learn how to do a great install that's safe and everything, and you learn how to make your driver's seat sound great.
Right.
And I think there's a place for that. That's kind of that, that's the same as the car show class, the in progress class. But you know what? When you go to a car show, a big car show, those guys, they get the dash plaque. They don't get big trophies.
And they're the minority.
Right.
And you have somewhere to work up to. You still have.
Right.
Yeah.
You still got to get your paint. You still got to get interior done. You still got to get all these aspects and chrome out your engine. So you're working towards being a real show car.
Right.
Like I said, those guys, they get a dash plaque and they get to hang out at the show and they get to rub elbows and they get to learn and be a part of the big picture. And I always felt like when the street class 1-seat judging stuff started, that it should have been the same thing.
Right.
They get to hang out. They get to do all that. Yeah. But having a world champion in that level of a class, I think is not, I don't think it was the original intent. It just kind of materialized and happened that way. So a lot's been left. So a lot of new competitors, they really want to slam old school competitors want to slam the new guys.
Right.
But it's truly just two different kinds of things. But at the end of the day, there's two front seats in your car. There's two front seats in your pickup or whatever. So
right.
Both seats should sound good. And I got a story, and then I'll kind of say my piece on that. So back a couple years ago, Chris Bennett from Audio Control asked me if I wanted to put a system in my car. If I did, he would provide me amplifiers and stuff if I would display my car at Knowledge Fest in Dallas in their booth. And I said, man, absolutely. I'd love to do that, because I've always used Audio Control products in some form or fashion forever. And there's kind of a small place I just have a place for Audio Control. And I like Chris, and those guys are great. So anyways, I put a system in my car, and it is, I put AudioFrog speakers all in it, a pair of woofers, and I do Audio Control amps, and I do their DM810 processor. So I set everything up, and, I got no choice but to set it up so that it sounds great from the driver's side.
Right.
No big deal. We go down there. Everybody listens to it. Everybody loves it. It's great. I come back home. It sounds great to me. I'm driving around. But guess what? I got my wife in the passenger seat and my kid in the back seat. And we go to dinner, and we do this and we do that. Well, then with AudioFrog, we launched some prototype up mixers.
Right.
So I add the up mixer to my car. And so now the left side sounds great and the right side sounds great. No big deal. I work on my car. I put the processor in. And literally, one of the next times that we go out to dinner, my wife is like, well, I'm glad you fixed your car. And then my kid in the back seat, chimes up, yeah, Dad, it sounds great. Well, think about that for a minute. Here
right.
I am. It's not the most expensive car in the world, but it's a mid-class car. I mean, it's a 5 Series BMW. It starts out with a Logic 7 processing. I take that out and make it only sound great from one side. You know what I mean?
Right.
My wife thinks I'm over here acting like it's great. My wife is going, you are nuts.
You went backwards.
Even my kid that's in elementary school is going, no, that don't sound good. So then I put an up mixer in there. I make it sound great from both seats, actually all seats. Now everybody's happy.
Yep.
So in the retail world, I think it's silly that a customer comes in with a high-end car that's got center channel processing, some sort of an up mixer, and installers rip that all out and charge the guy whatever, sky's the limit, on all this great new equipment, but they make it sound good for one seat.
Right.
That guy's got a wife or a girlfriend or somebody that's going to be in the other seat. Even if he says, well, I don't really care what it sounds like over there. Trust me, someone does. So it doesn't make sense in the retail world.
Right. Well, and the other side of it is a lot of the people who are doing car audio now aren't, you and I started young, but most of the people that are coming in to do car audio aren't the kids. They've all kind of grown up with us, and most of them have at least are married or have a family or a significant other or a partner that are with them a lot. They're not driving alone, most of them 24/7.
Right.
And so it's time for us to cut the selfish attitude and share a little bit.
Right. So then competitors, a class was built so that the newbie guy has an opportunity to compete, because everybody knows it's very difficult, more difficult to make 2 seats sound as good as making one.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, and so this class is developed, and suddenly there's all these world champions and this and that and everything. And so now there's no reason for those guys to evolve their system into a full-blown stereo system. You know what I mean? As I would say, stereo meaning left and right seat, both sounding both sounding great.
Right.
And again, I know a lot of guys may listen to this. They may think, that guy, this or that or whatever. And hey, it's my opinion. Just like it's your opinion, if you think you want to make your car sound fabulous from one side, in one seat, man,
Right.
knock yourself out. I'm not going to talk bad about you. Just like it's my opinion that both seats should sound pretty darn good.
Well, and I think it's the challenge involved as well, right? I mean, because I'm not going to say it's easy to do a one-seat car and do it at a very high level. There's lots of complexity involved in that, but I think it's evident by even the outcomes and the scoring that all these cars are very compressed as far as they all sound, they're all scoring very similar.
Well, exactly. And the fact that one thing I also noticed, like, Chris has had his show down there, Aggieland, the last several years.
Right.
And of course, I haven't followed it very tightly, but I know Steve Head has won that event with a couple of his cars several times.
Right.
And these are, for the most part, old school built installs in cars,
Right.
sound quality and such.
Right.
So there's a lot of proof to say that, he's building a two-seat car, that it took minimal work, and it's beating all these single-seat cars. So the single-seat car isn't necessarily the end-all sound quality.
Right.
I don't know. We could go around and around all day long. Everybody's got their own opinion on that. Me personally, I think a two-seat car is the best. That's what I always built in the past, and cars that I build in the future will be like that.
Right.
And I just truly believe that's best. And then, and again, I'm going to jump back to the retail side of it for a moment. The guy that's going to build a one-seat great sounding car versus the guy that builds a two-seat great sounding car. The guy that builds a two-seat sounding great car, his ticket will always be larger, and he'll make more money. He'll be more profitable.
And that was a big. These conversations was a big push for us to do the show you're talking about in the spring. Because car audio competition, if you put that all together, means more than sounds good, from one judge from one seat. And when you throw the install in with it, and you throw some SPL in with it, and you throw the RTA in with it, and you combine all those things, regardless of what your thoughts are on install affecting the sound. No, but it's part of doing a car audio system. It's the same as going to a car show and, saying, well, or even just cars in general. You can't sit there and say that this Ferrari is exactly the same as this Corvette or this Camaro because they all go 0-60 the same. There's more to it than that. It's the same reason people you don't buy a Rolex because of how good it tells time. And that's the whole sense of car audio has been, to create icons of do cool stuff. And so that's, really kind of what we hope to inject back into it a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm excited, like I said, the future will have, I've kind of wanted to get back into a little bit of competing. I'll never chase every show around the country like I used to, but maybe pick out a couple things and do it because I like the camaraderie. I like the people. I like cars. I like music. I mean, when I hear a song, I listen to a lot of classic rock and stuff like that, which is crazy to think classic, but that's music I grew up on. And every time I hear a song, I've got some kind of childhood memory that I can relate to certain kind of music or something. Every time the first time I ever remember hearing Jack and Diane, I was at a video arcade playing Pac-Man or Dig Dug or something like that, Galaga or something. You know what I mean? So every time I hear that song, boom, that part of my childhood memory comes back, and man, I just love that stuff. I can tell you just about year and month any of those songs ever were released. That's just my deal. I'm big to that. So I'm passionate about that and music, and so I love it. I just and I want to share what I know and teach some of these guys because there's a lot that's still there.
Absolutely. And that's why, like I said, with the majority of people out there competing today, I mean, we all talk shit, but at the end of the day, I don't think anybody is coming out is competition. So yes, there are the people who definitely want to come out and be the best and get the biggest trophy, and it's disappointing when they don't. But overall, that's really not the reason. I find, it's the camaraderie of doing a very niche thing and inside of a niche industry that, there's only very few of us that care, but those of us that do, are very passionate about it. Of course, the people, the music, everything you just mentioned is really what's about, and those are the reasons you should come out and do it. Not, not because it's run by machines or necessarily the absolutely perfect system in everybody's eyes. But yeah,
Right. Oh, you're right.
oh man, I appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to seeing you come out in April. We'll have to do a recap there during the event and see how it goes, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thanks for inviting me on. It's been some fun this morning.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.